Hello there, and welcome to the planet's memory, a space where curiosity takes its time, where science is allowed to wander without edges, and where questions are asked more for the comfort of mystery than the certainty of an answer. Tonight, we are going to drift slowly into one of the oldest and most haunting questions humans may have ever whispered under the stars. What if the very first burst of a dying sun was not seen through technology, not measured by telescopes or machines, but by human eyes alone, unshielded, ancient, and open to wonder? What if the story of supernovas, those rare and violent deaths of stars, first entered our memory not as science, but as awe? Before we step into that sky together, I'd like to invite you to linger for a moment. If you enjoy these slow explorations, if you feel at home in this journey through both scientific fact and quiet speculation, consider leaving a like or subscribing. It helps this small corner of calm find others who search for stillness, for mystery, for the kind of questions with no quick answers. And now, let us wander upward, into a sky held by memory. Imagine the Earth tens of thousands of years ago, long before cities, long before tools of glass and polished metal, when the night itself was the only theater. The dark canopy stretched without interruption, and stars did not compete with cities of light. Perhaps we were gathered near water, perhaps surrounded by trees humming with insects, perhaps around a fire carved out of dry wood. And then, without warning, a new star appeared, brighter than the others, brighter even than the moon. It blazed into existence with no story yet attached, no myth, no explanation, only silence, and the stunned rhythm of breathing. What happens within a human mind when something so impossible arrives above them? A supernova is the death of a massive star, its core collapsing, its matter scattering, its energy breaking open the sky. We can explain it now with physics. Hydrogen consumed, iron no longer able to hold the burning shell, collapse racing inward, rebound surging outward. But then, long before equations or models, there may have only been wonder, confusion, quiet fear. And maybe that fear was more powerful because it could not be resolved. The first witnesses could not step away, could not close their eyes. The night sky itself had transformed. We often imagine past humans as separate from us, but the truth is their minds were not so unlike ours. They too remembered, they too imagined, they too searched for meaning inside silence. Could it be that the first stories of gods descending, of fires lighting the heavens, of strange spirits arriving and fading, were seated in the rare, brilliant moment of a supernova? Maybe these glowing visitors were recorded not in books, but carved faintly on rock walls, etched into patterns of pigment and stone. The sky leaves no fossils, yet in a strange way it does, because starlight can imprint itself not only onto soil but into memory, and memory, fragile though it is, becomes a kind of archive. Geology sometimes interrupts myth with proof. Scientists today can trace isotopes, rare elements that arrive when a star detonates somewhere close enough for Earth to feel. Iron-60, for example, dusts our planet in layers, falling silently into oceans where sediments trap it, only to be revealed millions of years later in cores of drilled rock. What if these invisible rains of isotopes were not only physical but also psychological? What if fragments of light and fragments of story fell together, creating both layers in stone and layers in culture? We are left with two kinds of fossils, one etched into the crust of Earth, the other buried within us as forgotten echoes of awe. And when that impossible brightness finally began to dim, when the weeks passed and the flare softened, what must that have felt like? Imagine watching the sky for months as a brilliant jewel slowly faded away, day after day, little by little, until the memory of its brightness was all that remained. Like fire smoldering into embers, like voices that drift into whispers, the star retreated from view, leaving silence in its place. Did those who watched wonder if it would return? Did they wait in vain, hoping night after night to feel that same thunderous glow above them? The rhythm of expectation may have shaped their days, until time itself became tied to brightness and absence, to presence and disappearance. There is an ache to memory, a weight that time adds as it stretches across generations. Each telling of the story grows softer, each carving erodes, Each layer of pigment flakes away. And still, the question remains. Who were the first eyes to see the fire of a dying sun? Was it one person, waking deep in the night, startled by sudden light on the horizon? Or many eyes at once, whole groups of people whispering, pointing, searching for meaning in unexplainable radiance? Maybe the true story is not one of sight at all, but of silence. A silence so deep it became its own language. And so, as we drift deeper into this quiet possibility, we are left with both science and speculation bound together. The physics of collapse, the debris of iron, the rain of isotopes, all real, all measurable. But also the fragile threads of identity and myth, the way humans turn light into meaning, the way we fill the dark with questions, the way we cling to the sky to better understand ourselves. Not because we needed an answer, but because mystery itself is a kind of survival. The question hangs unresolved, the way starlight stretches across space until it fades into invisibility. What if the first supernova we ever saw was not only the death of a star, but the birth of our need to wonder? And yet, if this much can be held, if all this deep can be carried across our species like breath, what else waits in the night for us to remember? The night is never empty. Even in its greatest darkness, it holds patterns, scattered points, drifting horizons of light. After the first quiet wondering of what it might mean to see a star burst alive above them, people did what we have always done, they watched. We follow them now, not in noise or urgency, but in a kind of drifting presence, tracing the possible shape of their awe. Imagine early humans looking upward not as astronomers, but as wanderers, as listeners of silence. Long before constellations had names, people saw relationships among the stars. A curve reminded them of an animal. A cluster whispered of a gathering. Skies became stories, and stories became maps. But then, one night, a new flare entered the patterns. A sudden star brighter than all the rest. Not just brighter, but significant, impossible to ignore. A cosmic interruption caught in human sight. Perhaps it was first noticed at the edge of awareness. Someone squinting upward, seeing something unfamiliar beyond the fire's glow. And perhaps they said nothing at first, unsure if the mind was playing tricks. Yet as days passed and the luminous point refused to fade, others looked up too. It turned communal. Voices hushed, not because this light was feared like a predator, but because fear was softer here, woven with wonder, stillness, uncertainty. You can almost sense it. The way people sat a little longer by the fire, tilting their heads back, pointing quietly, unable to shape what they felt into words that lasted. It is difficult for us now to feel what they felt, because our eyes live against a sky drowned by lamps and cities. But back then the night was their cathedral. Every spark mattered. To see a sudden new one must have been like hearing an unfamiliar heartbeat in the rhythm of the world. Faster, sharper, pulling at something concealed in the chest. The star did not just shine, it altered the patterns. Constellations they trusted to guide migrations, seasons, and stories were disrupted by the sudden intruder. Was it a sign? A door? A wound in the fabric above them? And so the earliest drawings may have begun, not as art for its own sake, but as attempts to hold what was unholdable. Fingers might have traced its position in the sand, sticks scratching circles on stone, pigment staining cave walls with spirals that struggled to capture the brightness of what no pigment could ever reproduce. Did they chant about it, weaving the foreign point into rhythms that lingered long after they slept? Did they wake each morning with questions that deepened rather than resolved? The sky itself carried the one record that endures. The star still burned there, stubborn, luminous, written in its own light. Generations of eyes may have watched the same flare, children introduced to a new sun. Above them, elders quietly wondering what it might mean for seasons, for the animals that roamed, for the earth beneath their feet. Some might even have imagined the horizon was aflame. After all, when light this strong reached them, it must have shimmered even against familiar ridges of distant hills. If sparks erupted on horizon lines, was the world changing too? And beneath all these questions lay geology, working in silence as it always does. Beneath those horizons, The crust moved, rivers wore through stone, elements shifted in cycles older than awareness. Every layer of soil, every fossil softly pressed into rock, every isotope drifting through sea currents. These were happening while humans were busy seeing, gasping, recording myths in uncertain voices. In this way, the flare of a star above us is always entangled with the slow mutations below us. The two are not separate stories, but one long thread. The spark above becomes history beneath. Could it be that seeing a supernova, even with no understanding of its physics, marked a threshold for our species? A threshold where perception stretched beyond survival into mystery for its own sake. To stare at something that neither fed nor endangered them, simply because it was there, is to glimpse the beginning of curiosity as identity. And in some way, aren't we still doing exactly that? Still looking upward, still following things we cannot quite understand, still turning silence into speech, awe into memory? We may never recover the exact words or thoughts those first watchers spoke. Their voices are buried, their languages lost. But the star itself remains in cosmic memory, elements scattered across the universe, traces buried in sediments the ocean hides. The record above and the record below, the sky and the earth, both remember what human tongues forgot. Memory is not only within us. It lingers in atmospheres, in isotope trails, in quiet bones of the planet. And so, as we drift further into this ancient night, we carry their awe forward. Sparks on the horizon, sparks in the mind, a resonance across millennia. The lingering flare becomes a bridge between what they lost and what we now rediscover. And yet, if awe itself can vanish with only fragments left behind, if silence swallows voices but spares the sky, what else might have been witnessed that we have no trace of at all? What if the sky is not the only place that remembers? If Chapter 2 left us with the question of lost voices, of awe unpreserved in language, then perhaps the answer lies not above, but beneath our feet. For while human words fade, the earth itself records. Rocks, sediments, crystals, and clays. These are the libraries of time, and their shelves stretch back farther than the imagination can endure. Not written with ink, not etched in carvings, but inscribed with the subtle signatures of elements born in stellar explosions. To stand upon the ground, even unaware, is to stand on a story so vast and so silent it waits patiently across epochs. Scientists today, drilling into cores of marine sediment or slicing thin pieces of layered rock, have uncovered something extraordinary. Isotopic markers, atoms unlike most others, atoms that do not belong to Earth's everyday cycles. One of these, iron-60, is scattered across ancient geologic layers, arriving here long ago as dust drifting from a nearby supernova. It is faint, so faint it requires the most precise instruments to detect. And yet, its presence is undeniable. Every atom becomes proof that a star once burst close enough to shake this planet, leaving behind a chemical fingerprint impossible to erase. When you touch a stone, you are closer to the memory of stellar death than you might imagine. Perhaps those early humans, the ones who stood in awe beneath the sudden flare, did not realize the ground itself was becoming an archive of what they witnessed. As their eyes searched the horizon, particles were already settling invisibly. Dust born from a cosmic fire sifted through the atmosphere, blending with soil, mixed into lakes, washed into seas. Over ages these traces were layered deep, hidden beneath new rock, beneath shifting continents, beneath oceans that rose and fell. Long after their words vanished, the Earth had preserved the event as surely as a fossilized shell. There is comfort in this thought. Even when memory within us grows frail, memory within the stones endures. Rocks do not forget, not easily, not quickly. They hold the isotopic scars of cosmic upheaval, scars invisible to the eye but certain in their persistence. We might walk across a cliff, admiring its curves, unaware that within its thickness rests the residue of an ancient star's final breath. To the rock, time has no urgency. What is 1,000 years to stone? What is 10,000? The record is not hurried. It simply waits. Geology is, in this way, a kind of planetary consciousness. Erosion is the slow erasing of pages, subduction the recycling of text, uplift the rewriting of lines. And scattered within those processes are hidden chapters of supernovas, comets, impacts, climate shifts. The Earth remembers not as we do, with thoughts and recollections, but through accumulation, through physical impressions that last longer than any story told aloud. If we could translate stone into voice, what song might it sing of skies aflame? And yet, even here, the record is incomplete. Tectonic shifts bury, rivers erase, heat melts, oceans dissolve. Stones remember, but with gaps, with stutters of silence. Could we be walking upon entire epochs of cosmic history erased so cleanly they may never be recovered? Perhaps there were supernovas brighter, closer, fiercer than the ones we detect now. Events that left no isotope behind, events whose memory was carried only in eyes we can no longer reach. The sky records in brilliance and the Earth records in atoms, but both are editors as much as historians. Neither gives us everything. Still, there is awe in knowing that cosmic debris has become part of us too. The iron forged in stars fills our blood. The calcium rests in our bones. The oxygen fuels our breath. If the stones hold memory in isotopes, then perhaps we hold it in physiology. We are, in essence, walking geology, fluid archives of stellar dust. When we ask if the ancient witness of a supernova has been forgotten, perhaps the quiet answer is, not entirely. Not while atoms themselves still remember their birthplace. Could it be, then, that every mountain is a monument, every grain of sand a silent testimony? We will never know the names or voices of the first humans who watched a star ignite the night, but when we touch the Earth we are, unknowingly, touching the same record they left behind. Stones whisper their archives in patience, waiting until slow and careful science learns to listen. They do not shout, they do not rush, they simply hold. And as we listen, we may realize that there is no separation between us and the sky. The star that died scattered itself to Earth, inscribed its farewell here, and that farewell has become part of our own long story. All the while, the stones beneath us keep their silence, as if to remind us that memory need not be spoken to last. And yet, if rocks can remember the deaths of stars, if elements can carry archives across hundreds of millions of years, what other hidden chapters in Earth's memory are still waiting to be uncovered? If stones could remember in silence, then humans remembered in story. Beneath the same sky that carried a sudden star, around circles of fire flickering against the night, voices rose to tame the mysterious flare into something they could hold. Flame has always been companion to thought, its dance mirroring the tremble of imagination. And so it is easy to picture that brilliant point in the heavens finding its second life not in stone or isotope, but in the rhythm of words, in chants and myths flowing like the rivers of firelight themselves. Campfires were not only warmth or safety, they were theaters of meaning. Shadows cast on cave walls, faces lit and then hidden again, gave weight to the stories recited. Here perhaps the sudden star became more than a light. Perhaps it became an ancestor, or a spirit arriving, a signal sent by gods or sky animals that walked among flames of their own. Around the arms of orange and red that licked the air with restless motion, humans learned to take what they could not understand and give it texture, turning the distant death of a star into an intimate presence beside them. The rhythm of fire carries its own hypnotic current, repeating, shifting, pulsing in a slow and steady beat. It does not surprise us, then, that stories were told in similar cadences, using repetition, rhyme, call, and response. The star in the night may have been described in words that circled like the sparks rising from logs, returning again and again so that children could remember, so that travelers could bring the memory with them, so that silence itself was filled with meaning. Could it be that myth itself was seated beside supernovas, not because the star needed to be explained, but because awe itself demanded a vessel? And imagine the comfort it gave, even if beneath the comfort lay fear. To know that the flare was not nameless but wrapped in the familiar dress of story. A fierce thing softened into metaphor so it could be carried without breaking. A star's violent death, ungraspable, untouchable, too vast for comprehension, softened into the image of a dragon's breath, a divine fire, or the eye of a sky wanderer. Around the fire, the impossible became shareable. In this way, myth is far more than invention. It is geology of the spirit, sediments of significance layered upon experience, pressed softly until they become solid enough to pass into memory. The sky gave the spark, the fire gave the rhythm, the people gave it shape. And somewhere in this triad, awe evolved into continuity. What began as a blazing interruption above became a thread woven into identity below. But time, too, shapes stories as erosion shapes cliffs. Without writing, every retelling shifts. A detail left behind here, an addition layered there. Over generations, myths drift like rivers, always connected to their source, yet endlessly changing form. Sparks rise, sparks vanish, sparks return anew. Could we, with patient listening, trace today's scattered stories of gods, omens, and lights back to a single flare once witnessed at the edge of survival? Perhaps. Or perhaps the star became many things at once in many places, carried by fire into endless variations. And in this way, the star did not die at all, but multiplied itself through myth. Even now, thousands of years later, when we sit by campfires or watch the glow of a hearth, we carry something of that ancient memory with us. Firelight softens silence, softens distance, softens fear. Shadows on the wall echo shadows once made by storytellers long ago, their faces flickering in the same rhythm, their stories binding the incomprehensible into a thread of belonging. It is not unlike the way rivers carve valleys, slow and steady, unseen in each moment yet undeniable across centuries. Fire was the river, story was the current, and the star was the spark thrown in to begin the flow. And so humanity bound itself to the skies not only with eyes but with voices, not only with isotopes in stone, but with metaphors in story. Elements rode the winds into Earth's crust, and emotions rode the waves of flame into oral tradition. Two records, parallel and inseparable. And if both silence in rocks and rhythm in voices remember, then perhaps memory itself is not fragile at all, but simply moves differently. One deep and still, the other bright and fleeting. And yet, if firelight could bend awe into myth, if voices could soften the violence of suns into rivers of meaning, what other celestial events might have been woven into tales we still tell but no longer recognize as echoes of the sky? Stories by fire could carry memory for a season, or for a lifetime. But Earth carries memory longer still. While voices shift and fade, while myths scatter into fragments across generations, the ground beneath us writes its own version of history. Slowly, invisibly, in the quiet language of elements. If the campfire was humanity's first archive, the rocks became the planet's archive, silent, unbroken, pages bound in strata that no wind could scatter. Stars do not only vanish in a blaze. When they die, they scatter their matter outward, a storm of fragments expelled into the galactic sea. Those fragments drift until they touch other worlds, quietly embedding themselves into soil, ocean, and stone. We may not notice, but once in a while, Earth receives what might be called isotopic rain. A slow, steady settling of rare elements born in stellar death. These atoms do not belong here. They are excesses of violence carried across light years, finally falling as unnoticed dust. And yet, in their chemical peculiarities, they tell us stories the human tongue could not have carried. Among them are isotopes of iron, iron-60, for example, a signature of nearby supernovas. Layers of seafloor sediment contain faint sprinklings of it, grains so delicate they require extraordinary patience to find. Strontium is another, binding itself into minerals, marking cycles of tectonic uplift and cosmic interference alike. These particles are not decorations of stone. They are relics of sky. To hold such evidence is to touch the aftermath of explosions beyond all scale. What once blinded ancient eyes has now written itself into the quiet ink of geology. Geologists often describe Earth as a grand archive, but unlike human libraries, its shelves are ordered by pressure and time. Each layer presses on the one before, compressing stories into dense chapters. Sand becomes rock, mud becomes shale, coral becomes limestone, And folded within these structures are traces not from Earth at all, but from stars that lived and died far away. Imagine leafing through a book, only to find between its pages a letter written in a language older than alphabets. This is what isotopes are, quiet messages cut into the geology of our world. Even as rivers carve landscapes away, even as winds grind cliffs into dust, fragments of light endure. The isotopes we find today are faint, whispers more than songs, yet they are enough to confirm events larger than our imaginations. They prove that our planet does not live in isolation. It is open to the cosmos, bathed in starlight and debris, part of an ecosystem far greater than its boundaries. Could it be that Earth remembers not only its own story, but the story of the galaxy unfolding around it? This introduces an odd kind of humility. Myths told around flames seemed eternal to those first humans. And yet, in the scale of deep time, hundreds of millions of years, billions of winters and summers, oral stories vanish like sparks on wind. But the Earth remembers in silence. Large stone cliffs hold isotopes like forgotten ink. Volcanic outcrops pin radiation in their lattices. Ice cores preserve atmospheric scars of bursts long past. The sky leaves its traces, Earth absorbs them, and if we are careful, science teaches us how to listen. To walk through a canyon, to touch the ribbed walls of ancient sediment, is to stroke pages of the sky's archive without knowing it. Strontium shifting in its quiet bonds, iron-60 buried deep within layers of ocean-borne stone, all waiting with timeless patience. No myths, no metaphors, only records. And yet we, unable to live without story, transform those records into narrative once again. We imagine what those ancestors felt beneath the sudden flare, and we balance it against isotope evidence beneath our feet. Myths rising upward, isotopes sinking downward. The two patterns mirror one another, tethering humanity to its cosmos. Is it possible we too are already leaving our own isotopic trail, our own technofossils that the far future will decode as easily as we now read iron or strontium? Civilizations may rise and fall, and yet perhaps one day this quiet archive will tell of us. The layers warped by plastics, by carbon isotopes from burning ancient fuels, by mineral scars recording our time. The Earth's library does not choose what it keeps, takes everything with equal patience. And so we find ourselves inside two archives at once. The mythical river passed through fireside story, and the geological library etched by stars into matter. One flickers quickly, the other lasts beyond extinction, but both form part of the Earth's memory. To move among them is to understand that our role is not just to live within time, but to join it, to become another layer, another thread in a sky that writes in iron and clay rather than words. And yet, if the rocks themselves speak of explosions too vast for language, if the quiet archive of geology continues its patient work, what other records of the stars might be entwined with our own human story, waiting for us to notice? If the archives of stone whisper of stellar death, then there is another archive that whispers more quietly still, the fossil record. Fossils do not only tell us of life that was, they tell us of life that ended, often suddenly, sometimes in silence too vast for any single cause to hold. And here a question lingers with curious weight. What if some of those breathless endings did not begin on Earth at all, but in the skies above it? Could the death of stars, distant yet powerful, ripple across light years and find its way into the fragile lineages flickering here on our small world? Extinction is often thought of as purely terrestrial. Volcanoes bursting, ice grinding down upon continents, oceans shifting, withdrawing, returning in restless rhythms. Yet scientists have wondered if the echoes of distant detonations, the sudden radiation of a nearby supernova, the invisible waves of particles cast out across space, might also leave their traces here, not as fire raining down, but as subtle pressures. Atmospheric chemistry altered, ozone thinned, climates shifted. Over hundreds or thousands of years, these pressures could have tightened upon ecosystems until, quietly, a threshold was crossed. Life, abundant once, dwindled into absence. Imagine the night sky flaring with brilliance, seen by ancient eyes as wonder, but unseen in its deeper consequence. Imagine the radiation reaching Earth not in fire we could notice, but in changes to invisible shields of our atmosphere. Ultraviolet light flooding more harshly, forests faltering, seas changing chemistry. Fossils layered in stone mark these transitions not with clarity, but with absence. Species that vanish between one layer and the next, as if erased by an unseen tide. Could it be that extinction, in part, is the Earth's echo of events far beyond it? The fossil record is filled with abrupt silences. Trilobites thriving for millions of years, then gone. Ammonites weaving their spiral shells in oceans across epochs, then gone. Giant reptilian lineages that once darkened the Jurassic skies, then suddenly no more. The rhythm of extinction does not always bear the shape of Earth alone. Some whisper that a nearby supernova, perhaps within a few dozen light-years, might drench a hemisphere with ionizing radiation enough to stress ecosystems without fire or impact. The evidence is faint, transient, hidden, and yet isotope signals, iron 60 in ocean crusts, hint that such events have brushed us before, close enough to leave a cosmic fingerprint. Perhaps extinction, then, is not only an ending but a dialogue. Life rises, thrives, experiments with countless forms, until radiation, climate, or shifting continents press too heavily. Entropy does the rest. Extinction is not violence alone. It is silence. It is breath withheld. It is the fading of songs once endless across Earth's forests and seas. And sometimes, in that silence, we might hear the distant resonance of a star's last breath pouring over us. There is humility in this. We are accustomed to thinking of our world as separate, a stage where only Earth writes the script of creation and collapse. But consider that extinctions here may be the aftershocks of detonations light years away. Consider that the sky itself has, at times, been a quiet participant in shaping who survived and who was erased. Could it be that in our bones, in the very shape of life that surrounds us now, there remains evidence of stars deciding futures billions of years from their ignition? In the end, the record is never precise. Rocks hold atoms, fossils hold forms, myths hold wonder. But none can tell us outright if a particular silence in life began with a faraway sun collapsing into itself. We are left with echoes. A whisper here, an isotope there, a shadow in the record where once there was abundance. What binds them together is not proof absolute, but possibility. And sometimes, possibility is enough to keep awe alive. Extinctions carry a paradox. They are endings, but they are also beginnings. Each great loss opened ecological niches that allowed something else to rise. Each silence became space for a new kind of sound. Mammals after the reptiles, flowering plants after forests fell, even eventually us, waiting within the ashes of earlier worlds. The memory of extinction, therefore, is both mournful and essential. It is the story of absence feeding presence, of one form fading to allow another to emerge. Perhaps even the violence of suns has become part of our lineage, written into the hidden library of life itself. And yet, if traces of stellar death can ripple across space to sculpt the story of Earth, if fossils and isotopes together whisper of skies entwined with soil, then what other distant fires might still be shaping us now, their echoes only just beginning to arrive? In the wake of fire always comes quiet. After the brightness of a supernova faded, after its echoes passed through stone and fossil, the sky would have returned to darkness. No blaze, no shockwave, only silence. And yet that silence does not mean absence. It is a pause, a rhythm between pulses. The universe itself breathes in this way. A star is born, a star dies. Between them stretches an interval of stillness so vast it feels infinite to us. To those who once watched the sudden flare of light, the days after must have felt strangely empty. Where brilliance had lived, only the faint canvas of starlight remained. Whispers may have slowed, myths may have softened, fear may have yielded to ordinary night. The darkness after awe is often its own kind of awe, quieter, less demanding, but no less profound. What is left when the story ends? Only patience, only waiting. Astronomy, too, is bound to patience. The timescales of stars are not measured in years, or even thousands of years, but in millions and billions. To glimpse a supernova in one human lifetime is rare. For the sky, it is just one heartbeat among countless others, unhurried, inevitable, repeating without concern for who might be awake to see it. Could it be that what feels like silence to us is simply the long breath of the cosmos, inhaling before another release of light? Between pulses, the universe continues its slow work. Dust settles, clouds of gas drift, galaxies swirl in majestic quiet, stars moving in patterns far too patient for human nerves to notice. Entropy does not rush. It leans gently, steadily, pressing toward balance. To lie beneath such a sky and see nothing happening is, in truth, to witness everything. The pause is not void but fullness resting in stillness. Even here on Earth, we know this rhythm intimately. The tide withdraws before it returns. A season of growth yields to a season of still. Trees enter silence in winter. Oceans pause between waves. Even our own breathing carries expansion and rest. Expansion and rest. What if the silence between stellar pulses is simply another version of this eternal rhythm, played out on a scale too vast for our senses to keep track? And perhaps it is within these silences that memory takes root. Too much light, too much motion, and we are overwhelmed. But in quiet, impressions settle. In quiet, the mind weaves meaning. Ancient humans, having seen a star blaze and then fade, would not have forgotten it instantly. They would carry it like an ember in the mind, glowing against the silence long after its fire was gone from the sky. Silence, then, is less an ending than a container in which awe can rest. It is tempting for us to imagine the universe as an orchestra, each star a note, each detonation a percussive strike. Yet what gives rhythm its shape is not only sound but pause. Without silence, music becomes noise. Without gaps, no pattern is felt. The cosmos breathes this same principle into us, moments of greatness, then long stretches of waiting. Perhaps this is not emptiness at all, but a reminder that meaning requires stillness too. Could it be that life itself depends on these cosmic pauses? Were stars to burst without end, radiation would flood every corner of our galaxy and life would never have a chance to form. Were the sky too busy, Earth would have no shelter. It is precisely because stars wait, because their cycles unfold slowly, that planets may cool, oceans may form, DNA may twist its spiral in safety. Silence may be not an absence of creation, but its prerequisite. And so, as we linger in this interlude, we are reminded that awe is not only in the blaze of the extraordinary, but in the patience of the ordinary, the long, dark intervals where nothing announces itself and yet everything is quietly becoming. The silence between pulses is not nothingness, but the soft ground from which the next brightness will rise. And yet, if the silence after a flare allows memory, if waiting holds story as surely as firelight does, what unseen stars lie even now in their long inhale, preparing one day to exhale brilliance into our sky once more? Silence between the pulses holds its own gravity, but even within that stillness there comes a moment when something stirs again. A single flare, sudden and uninvited, pulling attention upward. And when it does, we must ask, who were the first to notice? Not only one pair of eyes, not one lone wanderer, but perhaps many, scattered across the vastness of Earth, divided by continents, oceans, mountains, yet unified by the same night sky. The first witnesses, fragile and unknowing, joined across distances by a single burst of brilliance. Picture them, in open deserts where stars rained clear against a horizon uncluttered by trees. In frozen tundras where breath steamed into the air and each inhale felt sharper against the lungs. In restless jungles where canopy parted just enough for a patch of cosmos to leak through its weave. In caves near rivers, in grasslands swept by wind. Wherever they were, whatever stories they carried, they must have all lifted their faces and found, suddenly, a new star. Brighter than all but the moon, a mark impossible to ignore. These first witnesses were unlike one another in custom, in tongue, in tools, but in that moment they were the same. Awe erases difference. The flare spoke one language and it was silence. That silence told them everything and nothing all at once. For one group it might have meant promise. For another, warning. For yet another, an omen folded into ritual or song. Yet beneath all interpretations lived a shared truth. Something vast beyond comprehension had revealed itself. Perhaps this was the first time humanity became global in its awareness, that scattered groups under the same heavens unknowingly had their lives bound by a single event. We imagine them gathering around fire after seeing it, speaking in hushed patterns, pointing upward. Or perhaps they simply sat without words at all, letting mystery occupy them. What, after all, could be said? Language falters against immensity. Sometimes presence is all that can be offered in reply. Perhaps the witness was not measured in speaking at all, but in widened eyes, in slower breaths, in the stillness of bodies turned skyward. The fossil record will not tell us of these moments. Stone does not preserve their awe, only the dust that fell with the light. Myths may echo fragments, but even those are worn thin across centuries. Yet imagination fills where silence leaves openings, and science assures us that if a supernova did flare within range of human sight, then people, across deserts, tundras, jungles alike, did indeed see it. They did not miss it. Stars that die so violently announce themselves to all who lift their gaze. And once noticed, such brilliance cannot be unseen. Night after night it would rise again. For weeks it would grow, a fixed marker larger and brighter than the rest. Communities far apart but alive at the same time could all look up and meet in a starlight they shared though they never shared words. Each gaze overlapping in its destination if not its culture. Perhaps this, more than any tool, was the root of connection. A sky too large to be owned, carrying symbols too vast to belong to any single tribe. The first witnesses endured something we cannot easily repeat. Imagine no science, no prediction, no readiness, only raw encounter. They had not been waiting for change in the sky. It arrived unannounced. That surprise, magnified by the brightness of a dying sun, must have reshaped how they felt about the heavens. No longer a backdrop steady and eternal, now a stage for sudden shifts. Could this realization have sharpened curiosity itself, awakening in them the conviction that the world was stranger, deeper, more alive with possibility than anyone had guessed? And still, with difference in geography came difference in meaning. In frozen lands, the glow may have seemed like a cold flame reflected on snow. In deserts it may have appeared as a rival sun, a heat without warmth. In forests it may have been glimpsed in fragments between swaying leaves, a patchwork of terror and delight. Each environment gave the same witness its own texture. And yet, above all their differences, the star joined them together invisibly, as though it had written a line across time tying all humanity, briefly, into one. What endured from those figures who first lifted their gaze? Most of their names are lost, their languages scattered, their lives erased into sediments of time, and yet their seeing remains meaningful. To imagine them is to imagine ourselves reflected backwards, carrying their awe forward. They remind us that looking up is one of the oldest human gestures. It does not matter where we are. What separates us disappears in the act of looking to the same point of wonder. And so, we return to silence, but silence now filled with something larger. For what the first witnesses saw remained in memory long after the star dimmed. The earth preserved its dust, but humanity preserved its imagination. And yet, if this one event bound strangers together across distance, how many other shared witnesses have come and gone, tethering us in ways we can no longer recall? What survives after a witness fades? Eyes close, voices dissolve, lifetimes end. But the impulse to mark what was seen remains. When the light of a supernova finally dimmed, something of it may still have lingered in human hands. Charcoal pressed into cave wall, ochre ground into dust, stones scratched with deliberate curves. Across the world, scattered in caves and cliffs, we find spirals, bursts, halos, marks whose meanings are lost to us, but whose mystery feels strangely alive. Could some of these be the echo of a star that flared and then vanished, captured not in scientific measure but in human gesture? We know that firelight shaped the rhythm of stories, and yet pigments outlasted voices. In caves dark as memory itself, people left behind patterns. Some are recognizably animals or hunts, but others resist explanation. Shapes radiating outward, circles enclosed by lines, stars etched in clusters. Did someone crouch in candle-dim light, dipping their hand into mineral dust, carefully recreating not only what was around them but what they saw above them? Perhaps a spiral was not just decorative but an attempt to hold onto the memory of a flare spinning wider than thought. Perhaps a halo ringed around a dot was not random, but a model of radiance, the only kind their fragile memory could trust to pigment. Dust was their ink. Firelight was their lamp. Walls of stone became their canvas. And in those dark places, shielded from rain and wind, traces endured. Unlike words that vanish with the last breath of a storyteller, these drawings stayed long enough for us to stumble upon them tens of thousands of years later, half eroded, half intact, their meanings uncertain. We enter their caves with lamps and cameras now, and even through the haze of time, the marks quietly hum with significance. They are proof of wonder, if not proof of what exactly that wonder was. Archaeologists debate. Was the spiral the sun? Was it the moon? Was it a shaman's trance? A vision of inner sight? The truth cannot be fully known. But is it unreasonable to speculate that at least some of these marks might be celestial records? That when a star burst into being, outshining even the moon, humans, unable to let it pass unnoticed, placed it on stone so the memory would not fall with the fading of light. We see and then we must mark. That impulse is as old as our species, perhaps older, carved into the marrow of being. And not only caves, ancient carvings on open rock faces, standing stones set carefully to align with the heavens. Many point to a sophisticated interest in the rhythm of stars. We know people charted lunar cycles, solstices, eclipses. Is it too much to imagine that a sudden flare, brighter than all, demanded its place in their etchings as well? If language faltered, perhaps their only recourse was to scratch, to paint, to arrange, the dust of earth repurposed to hold the fire of heaven. These marks feel fragile, but in truth, they are resilient. The pigments were ground from minerals older than the humans who applied them. Iron oxides, manganese, charcoal from ancient wood, all survivors of time. They speak a language we no longer read easily, yet they carry energy forward. When we enter those caves, we are not merely visitors. We are intruders into an older silence, still echoing with attempts to preserve what was never meant to be held. There is something haunting in that persistence. Imagine standing in a cave where hands once pressed pigment into wall for the first time. The torch flickers, the air is heavy, and there, on rock, a spiral or burst whispers across tens of millennia. I saw something vast, and I needed you to know. Perhaps it was not even meant for others. The painter may have known they would never be remembered themselves. Perhaps it was painted for the stone, for time itself, a message written into the planet rather than for another person. Memory as offering, memory as act of reverence. But as with all archives, erosion plays its part. Dust fades, carvings were smooth, pigment dissolves. What we have are fragments, hints, shadows of once vivid intentions. If a supernova was marked here, it is disguised now, swallowed in the ambiguity of form. And so archaeology and astronomy meet not as exact sciences, but as companions in wonder. The earth gave them dust, they gave it shape, and what returns to us now is speculation layered upon silence. Still, each spiral invites us to ask again. What did they see? What burned so brightly that hand and pigment alone seemed too small, and yet were the only tools available? Could it be that, in these ancient dreams turned to pigment, we stand closer than we know to the memory of stellar death? And yet, if even these deliberate attempts can dissolve back into obscurity, if pigment and carving too succumb to time's erosion, how much more could have been painted, sung, etched, and lost? What other fires were once remembered, and are now gone, leaving us only the dust of forgotten fires? Dust and pigment may fade, but some things endure beyond sight, beyond erosion, beyond even silence. Bones, for instance, fragments of structure that life leaves behind, pressed into layers of sediment as testimony that it once moved, breathed, and died. We hold fossils in our hands now as if they are the memory of creatures written in mineral, skeletons turned to stone, fragile yet lasting. And yet the earth is not the only keeper of bones. The sky, too, leaves its remains, not in calcium or marrow, but in the scattered matter of stars that once collapsed in fire. We might call them celestial bones, the relics of explosions that shaped everything from the rocks beneath our feet to the iron coursing quietly in our blood. When a star dies in supernova, its core implodes and then bursts outward, scattering its elements into the galaxy. These remnants drift and settle, forming clouds that may one day collapse again into new stars, new planets, new possibilities for life. What remains of its death is not ash alone, but building blocks woven into matter itself. Just as we trace the line of a trilobite across stone and say, "Here once was life," so too we can trace isotopes and metals across Earth and whisper, "Here once was a star's end." Both are bones, both are fossils, though one belongs to biology and the other to the cosmos. To imagine fossils is to imagine presence lingering long after departure. A mammoth's rib preserved deep in tundra soil is a body refusing complete erasure. And in a similar rhythm, the iron within that rib, that tusk, that fossil, is itself the skeletal inheritance of a star's collapse. Celestial bones within earthly bones. The nesting of memory upon memory. Every fossil, then, every fragment of stone anatomy we cradle, is also a reliquary of stars, its minerals borrowed from cosmic deaths older than Earth itself. Even the elements moving inside us, carrying oxygen, signaling through blood, strengthening bone, are traces of celestial skeletons. When we breathe, when we walk, when we speak softly, we do so with atoms that were once catapulted across space by violent endings. There is a tenderness in this, a gentleness not immediately obvious. Not because the supernova was gentle, it was not, but because time softened it. Time carried it into new forms until what was once chaos became stability, until what was once ending became the structure of bodies able to dream under the same sky. Scientists can track these remnants in the same way we track fossils. We look at isotopic ratios, at signatures of iron 60, plutonium 244, rare isotopes sprinkled like hidden codes. These are the fossils of the stars, not bones buried in stone, but atoms buried in clay, in ocean sediment, in ice frozen around air more ancient than pyramids, more ancient than names. Interpretation requires careful patience. Not chisels but accelerators, not brushes but detectors. And yet the work is just as much an excavation. We are paleontologists of the sky's memory, uncovering not vertebrae but isotopic clues of suns that sighed their last breaths long ago. Could it be that our very need to preserve bones, to collect fossils, to unearth remnants, is connected to this deeper inheritance? Perhaps we seek in the earth what the stars already gave us. The desire to hold onto structure in the face of absence. We do not want forgetting. We resist it with pigment, with carvings, with fossils, and now with science that captures isotopes. It is the same impulse, repeated in different eras, to let nothing vanish entirely. The metaphor of bones is appropriate because bones are strength, yet also fragility. They endure, but only with care, only when conditions allow their preservation. Stars, too, scatter bones across universes, but only a portion are caught, only a fraction remembered. The rest is dust dispersed into silence. The fossils we uncover are just as partial fragments of rib or tooth, never the whole. Memory is always incomplete, and yet incomplete memory is still enough. It is enough to remind us that existence was, that life walked here, that stars shone there. And so we hold them both. The fossil of a creature long turned to stone, and the isotope of a star long dissolved into galaxies, and we realize they are parallel testimonies of the same truth. That nothing truly vanishes, it only transforms into a different kind of relic, a different kind of trace, waiting for those patient enough to listen. And yet, if celestial bones live within us, if every fossil and every element is both Earth's memory and the sky's, then what are we but walking archives of forgotten explosions, carrying silently in our bodies the remnants of worlds we have never known? The bones of stars are not locked only in stone or scattered across sediments. They are closer, more intimate, woven into the very tissues of our being. To speak of supernovas is not to speak only of spectacles in the sky far above. It is also to speak of ourselves. For the witness of a star's death is not just an ancient event preserved in quiet isotopes or fossils carved by time. It is also the simple fact that every cell we carry is made of materials only stars could give. We are, in the most literal sense, the memory of stellar fire walking the earth. The iron moving within our blood, transporting oxygen with each slow breath, was born inside a star's violent death. Not crafted within Earth's crust, not conjured by chance, but forged in nuclear furnaces far older than any world we know. Every time our chest rises, every time our heart beats, we repeat rhythms that depend on the iron seated here by long-gone suns. Calcium braces our bones, a quieter remembrance of cosmic collapse. Oxygen itself, so necessary to our survival, owes its abundance to generations of stars continually burning, dying, scattering, repeating. Even the carbon that frames the spiral in our DNA is the ash of the universe's first great fires. To live is to echo in miniature the act of supernova. When you pause to consider this, it is humbling. You might lie down beneath the night sky and feel small, dwarfed by galaxies without measure. And yet the same night sky does not only become an expanse above you, it becomes a mirror of what flows within. Your body is not separate from it. Your body is an archive of it. Could it be that awe at the heavens has always carried this unspoken recognition? That when early humans stared at a sudden flare, they were not simply looking outward, but sensing, faintly, that their blood already carried a kinship to that light? Science confirms what myth intuited in fragments, that creation and ourselves are not divided by distance, but bound by inheritance. Ancient stories spoke of humans molded from clay, sculpted from earth, and perhaps without knowing, they were reaching toward a partial truth, that we are indeed sculpted, but also by the cosmos itself, by matter that did not originate here. In this way, modern astrophysics and ancient myth converge, each circling the same reality from different sides. We belong to the stars not metaphorically, but materially. And if this is so, then every movement of our lives is also a continuation of stellar history. The hand writing words, the voice telling stories, the heartbeat in the dusk, all are motions powered by atoms born in the implosions of stars. Memory does not only survive in fossil, pigment, or isotopic trace. It survives in living form, in us. We are not outside observers of cosmic history. We are participants, carrying its relics forward. But stars carry endings as well as beginnings. If their death gave us life, it follows that we too are part of the same cycle. Entropy reminds us that what is structured will loosen. Just as cosmic dust built us, we will return to dust again. Atoms free once more to scatter, to become part of other forms, other lives, perhaps even other planets. No witness of a star's death is temporary, because its elements never truly vanish. They shift into new arrangements, new stories, always flowing forward. If this is true for stars, it is also true for us. And there is comfort in that, to know that nothing is wasted, not even what feels like loss. The star within us is not symbolic but real, not romantic only but physical, carried in marrow and breath. To exist is to bear witness twice, once in seeing the sky above us, and once in carrying it within. The two mirrors of awareness reflecting into one another, reminding us that life is not a visitor here but an extension of something immeasurably older. To think this way is to soften the boundaries we imagine between self and cosmos. We are not sitting beneath a foreign expanse. We are sitting inside it, made from it. Perhaps that is why the night sky moves us so deeply, because it is recognition. It is not the sight of something wholly outside, but the reunion of self with unconscious origin. To look up is to remember. To breathe is to remember. To be alive at all is to be a witness of stellar death turned to living continuation. And yet, if every one of us carries this inheritance, if each beating heart is a testimony of stars, how might we learn to live in greater awareness of the cosmos within? What does it mean to walk Earth while carrying galaxies in our bones? If the star lives within us, then it also lives within the stories we tell. For what we cannot explain, we drape in imagination. Across centuries, across continents, many cultures have described sudden fires in the heavens, dragons breathing light, gods striking sparks across the sky, omens that appeared and vanished. These stories, passed down through generations, may not have been inventions alone. Could they be echoes, veiled fragments of memory, attempts to preserve what once shocked the night into brilliance? Humanity does not forget easily, but it forgets differently. Languages dissolve, scripts crumble, names are silenced. Yet within myth, something lingers. Myths are not histories in the ordinary sense, but vessels, carrying significance through metaphor. A dragon swooping across the dark, its mouth blazing with fire. Does this not carry the rhythm of something once seen? A sudden column of light across the void? A sword-bearing god striking sparks? Does this not echo the flash of a star swelling briefly into a second sun? An omen foretelling disaster? Did this not arise from knowing, without proof, that the heavens collapsing could carry weight upon earth as well? Around the world, certain images repeat. Circles of flame, serpents of light, suns pulled down from their domains. It is tempting to see these as shared imaginations only, yet how curious that they arise in cultures separated by great distances, cultures that never spoke to one another. Might they, instead, be independent recollections of the same kind of sky event? A supernova flaring, unexplained, unforgettable? If so, then myth becomes a mirror, carrying across thousands of years what memory alone could never sustain. And myths, like isotopes, are a kind of fossil. They are soft fossils of human thought, intangible, fragile, but enduring in their way. Where geology archives bursts in layers of stone, myth archives them in the fluid gestures of language. To hold an ancient tale is to cup in one's hands a memory of awe disguised as fable. The story may shift, merging with seasons, with heroes, with fears, but its core remains the same. Light appeared, suddenly, where before there was none. Consider the way myths often tie celestial fire to transformation. A god appears and humanity must change. A flame descends and an old era ends while another begins. In myth, fire is never neutral. It is always threshold, always boundary. Could this be the deeper truth of supernovae reflected in story, that they marked a crossing, a shift in how people saw the cosmos, how they understood their own place beneath it? Even if they could not know the physics of collapse, they knew in their bones that something in the sky had reached a threshold. Myth carried that threshold forward, dressed in images that the community could hold more easily than raw silence. In this way, myth binds not only memory but emotion. A scientific record tells us an event occurred. A legend tells us it mattered. Within these stories live the feelings of those who first witnessed the strange light, the fear, the awe, the trembling curiosity. Myth did not dilute these feelings but preserved them, like amber around an insect, holding still the mood of a witnessing too powerful to vanish. And though myths diverge across cultures, dragons in one, fiery birds in another, gods or serpents or collapsing suns, the echo is the same. A fire appeared above, it stayed, then it was gone. Myth does not explain. Myth remembers. And it is in remembering that we feel the kinship between cultures far removed. A forgotten star's fire may have been painted, carved, and sung into different forms, but the central pulse hums within them all. What then might we be overlooking? What other images might be misunderstood? Could rock art spirals, zigzags of lightning, or circles radiating lines be something more than artistic flourish? Could our museums hold forgotten supernovas rearranged into tales of deities and beasts? The possibility is not provable, but neither is it dismissible. The silence of science and the whisper of myth may, in their own ways, be speaking of the same lost light. And just as stars disperse elements into galaxies, myths disperse memory into culture. We inherit them without always recognizing their source. But when we listen closely, when we feel the strange resonance of shared images across distances, we realize that what myths have preserved is not only imagination, but remembrance. And yet, if myths carry sky events veiled in allegory, how many more await us, coded in stories we think we know, but which may in fact be the lingering echoes of forgotten stars. Stories may rise, myths may carry memory forward, but the star itself obeys its own rhythm. No tale, however vivid, can prevent the inevitable waning. After weeks of brilliance, unmatched and unmissable, a supernova begins to dim. Its ferocity softens into persistence, its persistence into glow, its glow into ember. To those who watched night after night, the change would not have been sudden but gradual, so gradual that awe blended slowly into melancholy. What once dazzled the heavens like a second sun began to retreat toward the ordinary, as though the sky itself were exhaling toward an ending. The long fade may have been the most haunting chapter of all. A sudden flare startles, but what lingers etches itself more deeply. Imagine rising in the dark each evening, glancing upward and seeing the light still there, but weaker now, a little less commanding. Eyes adjust, hearts ache. The strange visitor that had redefined the night was dwindling, and those who bore witness were left to carry the weight of loss alongside awe. They knew, even if unconsciously, that they were watching not only light but memory itself dissolve. This is the paradox of fading things. Their disappearance is almost more powerful than their presence. The slow retreat of a supernova would have taught a lesson humans already sensed in their lives: the impermanence of all things. Just as flames in a hearth consume wood and leave embers, just as rivers shift their boundaries, just as bodies age and bones return to dust, so too does a star flare and then fade. In this fading light we feel the rhythm of entropy, gentle but irreversible, always urging grandeur towards stillness. Science confirms what their eyes saw. After the initial explosion, brightness lingers for months, even years, as radioactive elements decay, as energy continues to radiate outward. In time it disperses entirely, its brilliance stretched thin until it disappears from view. For the watchers then, there was no theory of half-lives, no language of isotopes, only the visceral sensation of a once mighty flame drifting into nothingness, a fire retreating into infinite distance, leaving only the ache of remembrance. Perhaps this is why myths of skyfires are often tinged with sadness. Dragons that vanish, gods that withdraw, omens that pass and are no longer seen. The fading light would have been impossible not to mourn. What felt endless revealed its finitude. What seemed eternal revealed its fragility. Could this be the seed of our oldest sense of mortality, not only from death among our kin, but from seeing death written above us in stars themselves? And still, in fading, there is profound intimacy. To witness a star slowly dim is to share something rare with the universe, a front-row seat to impermanence painted on a cosmic scale. The slowness itself is a kindness, allowing time for watchers to adjust, to carry away the lesson rather than be struck only by shock. Days passing into months, the light lingering long enough to be remembered, long enough to inspire stories, but not long enough to stay. Memory became the only remaining vessel. Even so, traces endure. Our telescopes find remnant clouds where a star once shone, filaments spread outward like veils drifting through galaxies. To us, they are nebulae, fragile in appearance but massive beyond comprehension. Ancient witnesses, though, would have known nothing of these remnants. For them, the slow fade ended in absence. A sky returned to itself, its temporary wound now healed. Only their memories and myths remained to hold the event alive. The long fade is thus both physical and existential. It marks the cooling of energy, the surrender of light, but also the fading of connection. The moment when what bound human eyes together across deserts and forests retreats beyond notice. What was once shared in awe and silence is now shared in absence. A different kind of bond, quieter but no less felt. And yet, if the fading of one celestial fire could leave so deep a mark, if absence itself could teach as much as presence, how many lessons of impermanence and endurance still wait in the sky's palimpsest, layers written and erased with each cycle of light? The fading of a star is not simply an act of disappearance. It is the quiet beginning of rewriting. When the sky dims after a supernova, it does not return to its former self as if nothing happened. It carries the trace, even if subtle, even if invisible to most eyes. Astronomy, in this sense, is the reading of a sky endlessly edited and rewritten, like a manuscript where every page has been inscribed upon, scraped clean and inscribed again. Each flare burns a new line into the palimpsest of the heavens, then yields, leaving faint letters beneath for those patient enough to see through time. This comparison is not only poetic, it is true in a scientific sense as well. The night sky as we view it is already layered. Every star we see is a history lesson in light, its beam having traveled for tens, hundreds, or thousands of years before reaching us. To look upward is to look backward. A star may already be gone while its message still streams toward us, as though past and present have been pressed onto the same page. When a supernova erupts, its brilliance overwrites the familiar patterns, but once it fades, the stars beneath reassert themselves. The original constellation emerges again, though not untouched, quietly altered by dust, by remnants, and by the knowing that once, its pattern was interrupted. Astronomers today, reading the palimpsest, find the remnants preserved in hidden scripts, nebulae shaped by explosive filaments, isotopes pressed into minerals. These are the faded strokes behind the freshly inked stars. Like monks uncovering older words beneath parchment, we learn to detect the whispers of previous skies layered beneath the one we see now. A flash becomes absence, absence becomes cloud, cloud becomes dust, dust becomes seed for the next generation of light. Each cycle writes over what came before, and yet never entirely erases it. Imagine how it must have felt for early watchers. They saw a flare blaze into constellations they had trusted as unchanging maps. Their hunters, their guides, their gods now carried between them a blinding new presence. The flare faded, the constellation reclaimed its original form, but perhaps something lingered, an awareness that the sky was not permanent, that it could be overwritten in an instant. Perhaps this realization seeped into their myths as well. Gods replaced by other gods, empires crumbling into dust only to be built over again. Could it be that through watching the palimpsest of the heavens, humans first learned that all things, even themselves, are written and rewritten endlessly? Geology mirrors this lesson. Rocks accumulate layers, compressing eras into stone, each stratum a page in Earth's unfolding manuscript. Floods erase shorelines, then shorelines return, each event overwriting but never entirely eradicating the former. When we read rock, we are reading a palimpsest of landscapes. When we read sky, we are reading a palimpsest of stars. Both archives remind us, nothing is fixed, everything is draft. And perhaps this is why astronomy feels so strangely intimate. To look up is not only to see eternity, but to recognize impermanence. To realize that what appears constant is being slowly revised. The North Star we use as a compass will someday shift. Constellations will drift. Galaxies themselves reshape over unimaginable spans of time. Yet reversals leave their ghosts beneath, like parchment smudged with previous ink. We are reading not only what is written boldly upon the page of sky tonight, but also the faint residue of countless edits we will never fully decode. Light, too, participates in this endless rewriting. Radio waves from pulsars ripple through space, gamma rays scatter, X-rays hum, visible beams stretch across darkness. All different layers of ink spread across the same celestial canvas. Some bright, some hidden, some long faded into silence. Astronomy becomes not so much observing as it is listening for palimpsests, seeing not just what is present, but what lies concealed beneath the present. There is humility in realizing we are temporary readers of an infinite manuscript. Our eyes, our telescopes, our sciences are tools to glimpse fractions of the world's pages, but most remain lost to pace beyond our reach. Yet perhaps this partial view is sufficient, because fragments are what allow wonder to bloom. Were everything revealed at once, mystery would vanish, and curiosity with it. The palimpsest holds us in rhythm. Sudden flare, slow fade, faint residue, then new flare upon the surface again. And so we are not only witnesses but participants. The elements scattered by stars have written themselves into us as surely as they have into earth and sky. We are part of the palimpsest, layers pressed atop older layers. Bones over bones, dust over dust, thought over thought. Each generation overwrites the last, but always with traces remaining. Stories that echo myths, myths that echo witnessing, witnessing that echoes starlight. And yet, if the sky is indeed a manuscript forever rewritten, then what other words, what older lights, lie hidden beneath its current surface, scratched faintly into cosmic parchment, waiting for us to uncover them? Every flare we have traced, the burst, the fade, the lingering residue, is written upon the sky's palimpsest by one universal law: entropy. It is not drama, not disorder in the way we colloquially speak of chaos, but a quieter movement, a tendency written into the fabric of existence itself. Entropy is the cooling breath of universes, the steady leaning from order toward balance. And in this leaning, every dying star becomes not only its own story but an offering toward equilibrium, adding heat, light, and dust back into the cosmic whole. In physics, entropy is defined as the measure of disorder, but perhaps that word misleads us. Disorder suggests collapse, frantic unraveling. In truth, entropy feels more like exhalation. A fire blazes bright and consumes its fuel, then it relaxes, dispersing into air. A star hums in its nuclear labor until it cannot sustain it, then it dies, scattering its matter, no longer a furnace but still a source of contribution, enriching space with the elements of life. Death is not an end here but balance restored. When we look into the night sky, every point of light is a battle against entropy, and every nebula, every cloud of dispersed gas, is the exhaling that follows. Neither victory nor defeat, simply the cyclical breathing of time. Stars arise, they live for millions or billions of years, and then they surrender, not in vain but in service to a wider balance. The iron in our blood, the carbon in our lungs, they are entropy's artifacts, disorder reshaped as opportunity. Were entropy not at play, no star would die, no elements would scatter, no planets would form. Without entropy, there would only be silence, sterile and suspended, with nothing new ever born. It is strange to think that what allows complexity to exist is also what gently dissolves it. Entropy is paradox, destruction that makes creation possible. Every river eroding stone, every glacier carving valleys, every forest decaying into soil follows the same law. Stars simply play out this rhythm on scales beyond human perception. The heat of their burning radiates away, energy flowing from concentrated to diffuse, until balance demands collapse. The death that frightens us is, in truth, also the condition of our existence. Consider deep time, the patient span of billions of years. Entire galaxies are engines of entropy at work, light pouring outward, slowly equalizing temperatures across unimaginable voids. We live within this slow dispersal, yet our brief lives are too short to feel its rhythm. For us, time feels fragile, fleeting. For the cosmos, it is inexhaustible patience. Could it be that we experience entropy as loss, when on universal scales it is simply continuity? There is poetry hidden in its law. Entropy ensures that no flame burns forever, and yet it ensures that no flame is wasted either. The energy of a star's collapse radiates into new forms: planets, oceans, beings. The photon leaving a dying sun may one day strike an eye, spark a thought, inspire a story. It may settle into soil, rest as isotope, join countless pathways. Nothing remains concentrated, but nothing is ever truly lost. The dispersion itself is the gift. Perhaps this is why watching stars fade resonates so deeply with us. It mirrors what we sense in our own lives, the gradual dispersal of energy, the softening of vitality into stillness. We too follow entropy's arc. And yet, just as the elements of a star seed life after its end, so do our lives cascade into others, our breath into air, our atoms into soil. Entropy reminds us that we belong wholly to the cycle, not apart from it. Even silence owes itself to entropy. The pause between pulses, the long night between stellar deaths, is filled not with absence, but with the quiet redistribution of energy. Space hums with background radiation, the leftover breath of the universe itself. To listen to silence is to hear entropy at work, balancing, cooling, gently dispersing. Chaos is the wrong word. This is a law of calming, not of frenzy. And so, when we think of entropy in starlight, we might not imagine collapse so much as offering. Each death is a giving, a way of returning concentration back into the endless sea, a balancing act at cosmic scale. Stars are teachers in this, reminding us that our endings are not ruptures to resist but transitions into something wider, softer, endlessly folded into the whole. And yet, if entropy is indeed the quiet architect behind starlight and stone alike, shaping life into death and scattering death into life, what will it make of worlds yet unborn, waiting patiently within the dust of future stars? What entropy releases, the Earth receives. The dispersal of stars, the scattering of elements across galaxies, never vanishes into nothingness. Instead, it drifts endlessly, carried by solar winds, magnetism, and time, until those relics of fire settle into new homes. Our world itself is one such home. What supernovas scatter, Earth gathers quietly. Dust sifting down through air, dust sinking into oceans, dust woven into sediments that become stone. Dust is what remains when brilliance has exhausted itself, and yet in dust lies continuity. We often speak of dust as trivial, as nuisance. Yet in truth, dust is memory, the smallest fragments of an incomprehensible story. Beneath the light of our lamps, dust floats invisibly, each particle an archive older than our imagination allows. Much of it is terrestrial, born from erosion, from skin, from soils ground into air. But laced within these familiar specks are older grains, far older grains forged in the nuclear furnaces of long-dead stars. To inhale deeply is to breathe not only air but fragments of stellar funerals lingering inside us. Earth has gathered this dust from the beginning. When our planet first coalesced, it did so from a cloud seeded with the remains of earlier stars. Every ocean owes its oxygen to those grains, every continent its iron, every living thing its carbon and calcium. Even now, cosmic dust continues to arrive, raining in unseen threads, accumulating in polar snows, caught in deep-sea sediments. We have built entire laboratories to detect it, straining to separate the cosmic from the terrestrial, to hold in hand a particle that has traveled light years to reach us. Within these specks are isotopes unmade by any earthly process, quiet proof that we are still inside the wake of supernovas. And the Earth itself transforms this inheritance into surface story. Dust settles into soils where plants root, roots that become food, food that becomes bone. Dust dissolves into water droplets, drifts into lungs, mixes with the intimate channels of life. Over centuries, the grains sink deeper, compressed into sediments, sediment into stone. Layer upon layer, the record thickens until we can no longer easily separate what is terrestrial and what is not. Perhaps the truth is that separation itself is false. Earth is not apart from the stars. It is their collection, their residue, their gathered memory renamed as planet. There is a profound gentleness in the way dust lingers. A supernova may arrive as violence, its light searing across space, its radiation echoing in shockwaves. Yet what it ultimately gives to us is soft, weightless, delicate enough to vanish with the slightest breeze. Dust is the softened form of cosmic death, returned to us not in terror but in quiet. Could it be that this is the universe's way of teaching us that endings need not be only flame, that they can also arrive as silence falling lightly through air? Consider the paradox. The same substance that gathers on bookshelves, on forgotten corners of rooms, is also the evidence of atomic fire that once cracked the heavens. When we wipe it away, we brush from our hands particles older than Earth, particles that have survived not only time but catastrophe. Every speck is both ordinary and extraordinary, both nuisance and scripture. To neglect its significance is easy. To pause and realize its heritage is transformative. For scientists, dust becomes translation. They peer into ice cores where cosmic grains rest, locked in layers of frozen time, and they tell us of past flares and ancient bursts. They analyze deep-sea deposits sprinkled with iron isotopes no volcano could produce, and they decode nearby supernovas long extinguished. Dust is their text, Earth is the page, and entropy is the author whose pen is endless. The record does not announce itself, but it does not need to. It waits until discovery teaches us to read it. And for us, living ordinary lives far removed from laboratories, dust remains close as breath. We inhale it, we exhale it. We touch it on windblown days and track it in on the soles of shoes. We cannot escape it, for we are part of it. Our bodies, too, will one day return to dust, atoms collapsing into soil, into air, seeding new forms. Dust is not only what remains of stars. It is what remains of us, waiting to be gathered again into some new chapter of the cosmos. And yet, if dust carries the memories of stars and of ourselves, breathed in and out, scattered and reformed, then how much of our present world is already infused with unrecognized fragments of ancient starlight, drifting all around us, unnoticed but inexhaustible? Dust settles into soils and lungs, but light finds another kind of resting place. When a supernova unfurled its blaze upon Earth, the skies themselves were not the only witnesses. Beneath those skies stretched oceans, vast, restless, reflecting mirrors ready to catch the fire above. Imagine a night when the horizon itself glowed, waters rippling under a sudden silver star, waves catching fragments of brilliance and scattering them across miles in restless shimmer. A sun-like point, flaring uninvited, would not only have lit the land but painted itself across the surface of seas, turning them briefly into archives of radiance. The oceans have always been the Earth's mirrors. Even to us now, moonlight dancing on water feels otherworldly, containing emotion that words cannot hold. How much more overwhelming must it have been when an unfamiliar star pressed its own blaze into those moving surfaces, creating patterns that neither moon nor torch could produce. Silver fire flickering among tides, mirrored in depths filled with creatures who had no knowledge of what the light meant. Fish moving beneath luminous waves, plankton pulsing, corals unfurling their slow movements. Life unaware that the glow above was death transformed. A funeral pyre of a sun reflected as grace upon their world. The ocean, unlike stone, does not preserve impermanence. This memory is fluid, fleeting. Waves scatter what they receive, breaking light into billions of fragments, then reform moments later as though nothing ever happened. Yet perhaps that is its own kind of testimony. Not in permanent record, but in repetition. Each night the light reflected, each wave catching and dissolving the flare, each tide carrying it further. The ocean remembered not through storage but through rhythm, replaying the brilliance nightly until at last the source dimmed and the mirror returned to moonlight. Fading in the sky, fading in the water, twin endings joined in stillness. Scientists may not recover oceans as they were 10 or 20,000 years ago, but they seek traces in sediments beneath their floors. Layers of dust, isotopes like iron 60, settled upon shifting seabeds, the harder memory beneath the softer mirror. Yet there is still something haunting in knowing that for a time, long ago, Earth's seas shimmered with borrowed firelight. The song of a dying sun danced across liquid surfaces, and billions of small living beings swam within it, carrying on, unaware of their place in the audience of a cosmic event. Could some of the myths of sea fires and luminous tides be remnants of this? Ancient mariners describing waters glowing as if from within, fishing cultures telling of fires that floated upon waves? We often attribute such tales to bioluminescent algae, to tricks of atmosphere and reflection. But is it impossible that some may have been seeded by celestial fire mirrored upon seas? The possibility lingers like salt in air, faint, unseen, yet present. The ocean as mirror also shapes our perspective. To stand at a shore and watch the sky doubled in water is to realize again how little separation there is. The heavens above and the waters below echo one another, each doubling the other's vastness. When a supernova flared, it was not only brightness above us, but brightness around us, beneath us, beside us. In such moments we are suspended, wrapped completely in radiance, cradled by two infinities meeting at the horizon. Even now, our oceans hold this symbolic intimacy. Gazing upon moonlight wavering in waves, we feel drawn into stillness beyond language. Multiply that by 100-fold, the sudden shimmer of a dying star transfiguring the seas, and we catch some slender sense of what ancient eyes might have seen. Not terror, perhaps, but reverence. As though the planet itself, water and sky together, had joined to grieve and to remember. Entropy may scatter dust into lungs and soils, but its light pours first across water. Oceans fold it briefly into beauty, fleeting, fragile, but unforgettable. Though they do not store evidence in the manner of rocks, they hold it long enough for life to drift within it, long enough for memory to awaken in human eyes, pressed into myth and awe. And yet, if oceans once reflected the flames of lost suns, if waves once shimmered with unearthly radiance, what other celestial lights, uncounted, unrecorded, have passed across our waters, leaving no trace but ripples swallowed by time? The oceans may have shimmered with firelight for a season, but water does not keep its memories. Waves reflect, then dissolve. What was once brilliant on their surface is forgotten by the tide. Stone and ice, however, are less forgiving. They preserve events not in ripples but in scars. Across cliffs, across ancient glaciers, beneath strata pressed by deep time, there exist imprints not of animals or plants, but of the sky itself. They are what we might call sky fossils. The quiet remnants of radiation, cosmic bursts, particles that traveled unimaginable distances only to find final rest within Earth's patient body. When a supernova flares, the visual light is only one part of its legacy. Invisible showers of cosmic rays stream outward, fast and forceful, pouring across interstellar space. Most pass without leaving any trace within us. Yet some meet Earth's atmosphere, colliding with molecules, altering isotopes, leaving subtle transformations embedded in stone and ice. These are not fossils in the traditional sense. We cannot hold them in our hands as we hold the shell of a trilobite or the tooth of a mammoth. They are mathematical fossils, detectable through ratios, through the faintest scars. And yet they carry the same story. Something immense once occurred. Here is its residue. Ice cores, those transparent archives pulled from Greenland and Antarctica, are one such place, the sky writes. Within their frozen cylinders are trapped air bubbles, tiny shards of atmosphere older than humanity's memory. In them, scientists detect isotopes produced by cosmic rays striking Earth, spikes that correspond to eras of heightened radiation. They are the fingerprints of stellar death, preserved in frozen time, waiting for us to drill them free, to finally take notice of what has been quietly stored in silence. Rocks tell similar tales. Layers of sediment, ancient volcanics, even exposed desert crusts. All can carry isotopic anomalies. Iron 60 sprinkled through seafloor crusts confirms at least 2 or 3 nearby supernovas within the last 10 million years. Beryllium 10 and carbon 14 shifts hint at cosmic events altering Earth's radiation balance. Imagine that, buried in sandstones and shells turned to stone, are not only the stories of rivers and oceans, but momentary rainfalls of cosmic particles. The sky leaves its mark the way time leaves wrinkles across the body. Subtle, but unmistakable once you learn how to see. And like bones, these sky fossils offer us presence in absence. They cannot show us the light itself, that brilliance vanished long ago, but they testify to its having existed. In this, the isotopic scars are kin to footprints turned to rock. The animal is gone, but the step remains. The star is gone, but its particles trace awaits, embedded in the Earth's crust. Each one becomes a ghost of fire preserved in mineral silence. There is beauty in this slowness. No human eye saw the particles strike. No myth preserved the exact event. Yet the Earth remembered anyway. It remembered without effort, without intention. It simply absorbed what arrived, placed it in its vast archive, and left it for the future to uncover. What humanity forgot, stone held on to. What myth could not preserve, ice protected. In this way, the planet itself has been the historian, waiting for us to learn its language. We tend to think of fossils as creatures, bones hardened by minerals through patience. But perhaps it helps to broaden the definition. A fossil is a memory solidified, Where there is persistence, there is fossilization. A spiral ammonite pressed in shale is a fossil. The ratio of isotopes locked in iron layers is also a fossil, though less visible. Both are echoes of what came before, records written into matter that time did not erase. Both invite us to lean closer, to listen to stories too immense for witnesses alone. And so cosmic rays remind us. The sky not only dazzles, it inscribes. Not only dazzles, but endures. The fire that flared and died billions of years ago still whispers now through subtle transformations in crust and core. Each scar is like a single letter, and together they compose a long narrative written across continents. Earth's half-hidden diary of encounters with distant fire. Could it be that the universe itself insists on being remembered, even if not by us? That even when no story survives, no pigment endures, the very fabric of matter quietly bears its archive? We are only just beginning to read it, stumbling with crude tools across traces time does not erase. And yet, if fossils of the sky are pressed invisibly into stone and ice, layered with a patience that outlasts us, what other cosmic messages sleep around us still, silent inscriptions waiting until we learn how to see them for what they are? Every scar of radiation, every isotope folded into the crust, every fossil of the sky leads us to a larger recognition. Earth itself is not a passive stage upon which cosmic events are performed. It is a witness, silent, enduring, patient. If we could hear its language, the crust would speak as diary, each layer of rock and sediment another line in an account written over billions of years. Not written for us, not even written with intention at all, but preserved nonetheless, as though memory is simply what matter does when embraced by time. To imagine the planet as witness is not only metaphor. The evidence supports it. Iron 60 caught in deep-sea crusts, isotopic anomalies in ice, layers of dust rain down from stellar death. Each entry is not a poem, not a fable, but a note of fact. Once, a star died nearby, and I, the Earth, took part of its ashes into myself. Lacking words, the planet records instead through minerals, through geologic arrangements, through changes etched invisibly into atmosphere and sea. In this way, the Earth carries a continuity no human civilization has ever rivaled. Our stories fracture, our languages vanish, but the planet goes on writing line after line. Think of mountains as chapters, lifted and folded, stacked across epochs. Think of canyons as margins, revealing previous drafts beneath the newest lines. Think of volcanoes as sudden punctuation marks, reminders that the story is not calm but restless. To walk across any landscape is to move across text written in stone. We may not translate it easily, but the record is there, waiting. The Earth cannot hurry, but it also cannot forget. Patience is its memory. Perhaps the most haunting aspect is that much of this diary goes unread. We mine stone, dam rivers, cut into mountains, yet we often fail to see what each fragment of rock actually testifies to. Even scientific discoveries have come late. Iron 60 signatures that prove ancient supernovas brushed us were scattered for millions of years before we devised tools to notice. The diary was always here, the ink already dried, but we lacked the ability to read. What else, then, remains hidden, still untranslated, waiting for our science to catch up with what the crust already holds in silence? In thinking of Earth this way, we broaden the idea of witness beyond humanity. Memory need not belong to minds alone. Sediments remember floods. Ice remembers atmospheres. Coral reefs remember temperatures through the ratios of their calcium. Even tree rings carry the rhythm of cosmic interventions, sudden spikes of radiation pressed like margin notes into annual growth. Memory is not confined to brain or story. It is woven into matter itself, carried forward in physical record. We live on a planet that remembers for us, whether we ask it to or not. And yet this memory does not exist for permanence. Plates shift, mountains erode, oceans swallow coasts. The diary is always being rewritten. Some entries endure billions of years, others are erased in a single flood. This is both tragedy and gift. Tragedy because much has been lost, perhaps forever. Gift because what remains is enough to keep us searching, enough to suggest that even in loss, the act of remembering continues, reshaping itself in new pages elsewhere. What does it mean for us, then, to read this planetary diary? Perhaps simply that we are not alone in observation. For all the generations of humans who watched stars flare and fade, there was always another witness beneath them, slower but unfailing. Earth itself carried the memory forward, as if to remind us that we are not separate from the cosmos but immersed within its record. Reading the crust becomes an act of rediscovering our connection to sky, not metaphorically, but literally, written in isotopes, in strata, in ancient dust. Maybe this is what awe truly is, the recognition that memory belongs not just to us, but to the universe itself, carried in rock, in water, in air. We insert ourselves into this continuum with our questions and myths, but we are only one thread among many. The diary will go on long after we vanish, adding new lines, erasing old ones, telling stories no future reader may remain to hear. And yet, if the Earth has carried every fire and silence above it, recording in patient layers the story of the cosmos, what parts of its diary still lie unopened beneath us, waiting for a future hand to learn how to translate them? Every diary carries silences. In Earth's record, those silences are written not as blank pages but as absences in life, the abrupt gaps in the fossil record where abundance once flourished and then stopped, trilobites crowding seas and then gone, forests thick with amphibians and then empty, entire herds erased before their stories could ever fully begin. These gaps are the shadows of extinction, and within them lingers a haunting question. Were some written not only by Earth itself, but by the distant hands of stars? We know extinction is part of the cycle, a rhythm woven into life as deeply as birth itself. Volcanoes, asteroid strikes, shifting climates, ocean acidification, all have left their marks in bones turned to stone. And yet, some scientists wonder if in certain eras death may have also arrived from much further away, whispered down in cosmic echoes. Could the collapse of a nearby star have released radiation that pressed upon Earth's atmosphere, altering chemistry just enough to unthread delicate webs of life? Not fire raining visibly from the sky, but an invisible push, unseen but final. Imagine seas alive with ammonites, spiraled shells drifting through warm currents. Imagine trilobites crawling across ocean floors, eyes glittering with crystalline lenses designed to gather the filtered sunlight. And then imagine a shift, ozone thinned, ultraviolet harshened, climates destabilized by energies not born here but delivered from afar. Slowly, too slowly to be noticed by any single creature, their numbers falter. A threshold is crossed, and life retreats into silence. To those who followed long after, the fossils tell the story as a sudden line, a clear before, a vanishing after. Extinction carries weight not only in what disappears, but in what remains. Fossils do not mark endings with exclamation but with ellipsis. Each empty layer whispers absence. And absence, once entered into Earth's diary, becomes as important as presence. It tells us that history is not continuous, that continuity itself is fragile. To uncover a gap in stone is to brush against the shadow of something immense, the record of lives that could not endure. Perhaps this is why extinction feels so heavy, even when we speak of species long beyond memory. Their erasure resonates because it forecasts our own. If light once blazed in the sky and pressed itself upon Earth hard enough to shift its breathing, then we too are vulnerable to such pressure still. We live not apart from those ancient deaths, but as their inheritors, beneficiaries of the spaces they left behind. Mammals rose in the vacancy left by reptiles. Flowering plants spread in the absence of competitors. Each shadow produced the possibility of new light. Extinction, for all its sorrow, has been the sculptor of the living present. But still, the shadows trouble us. They leave us asking whether life's fragility is bound not only to Earth's moods but to the larger cosmos itself. Are we, in the end, at the mercy of not only tectonics and ice, but also distant stars collapsing, their death throws writing endings into our fossil record? If so, then the sky is not only inspiration and wonder, it is also risk. Its diary is written in two modes, Brilliance we remember through story, and absence we uncover through stone. Entropy ensures nothing lasts unchanged. Extinction is simply life's way of participating in that rule. But when we find silence where once there was abundance, we cannot help but grieve. To hold a trilobite fossil is to hold not just a creature, but its vanishing. And to wonder if somewhere, beyond space and time, a star once flared and signed its death into the very pattern of that vanishing. The link remains speculative, but speculation itself is a form of awe. And yet, if shadows of extinction are woven as faint signatures of cosmic pulses, what other silences in Earth's diary are not only Earth's? To whom or to what do we now owe the gaps we read in stone, the breaths life could never again recover? Every silence in the fossil record, every isotope in sediment, every fading myth points us toward a deeper pattern. The universe does not speak in isolated events. It speaks in threads, weaving one form of memory into another, knotting the fates of stars and planets together. And if we look closely enough, through microscopes, accelerators, and through imagination, we begin to glimpse that humanity itself is braided into this fabric. Isotopes, traces too tiny for the eye but unyielding to time, form a cosmic thread linking us to endings more immense than we will ever witness. Consider the isotopes scattered across Earth's crust, left by dying stars. Radioactive iron-60, locked in deep-sea layers. Beryllium spikes, captured in polar ice. Strontium shifts across sediments, whispering of fluctuations in cosmic radiation. Each one is a bead upon the same string, connecting sky to soil, soil to fossil, fossil at last to us. Science has always been about recognizing threads where before there were only fragments. To see isotopes not only as atoms but as stitched connection is to realize that our planet is part of a vast embroidery sewn by supernovas. This embroidery does not stop at stone. It extends into life. The carbon lacing through the molecules of our breath connects to the same cycles as the carbon measured in stellar ashes. The calcium shaping our skeletons echoes calcium formed in the heart of massive suns. Our iron, essential to every oxygen transfer in our blood, is quite literally the thread spun from stellar cores recycled through the galaxy. We are walking tapestries, woven of remnants more ancient than Earth itself. To trace isotopes is to trace the most intimate truth of being. We are stitched from the ruins of stars. And yet, threads are fragile. To misplace one, to lose sight of its connection, is to forget how the larger fabric holds together. Our earliest ancestors sensed intuitively that life was bound to sky, that flame above spoke to flame below. Myth carried that intuition. Today, isotopes replace myth as evidence, yet the essence remains the same. A desire to follow the lines, to understand what ties us to what. What was once story is now data. What was once explanation is now isotopic ratio. But at its heart, both are responses to the same feeling of connection. Geology teaches us that the Earth itself is part of the loom. Layers pressed in crust are woven with cosmological threads, recording not just terrestrial shifts but cosmic intrusions. Ocean sediments, patiently gathered, resemble fabric folded endlessly, each layer carrying minerals that tell where and when the stars intervened. It is as though the Earth gathered threads drifting aimlessly from the void and bound them into a single woven surface, leaving us with a tapestry no hand intended, but one every eye may study. Perhaps this is why the idea of threads runs so deeply in our metaphors. Fates woven by unseen hands, life as fabric, time as cloth unraveling. Without the word, we may not have known it, but we have always lived in a weave of star and soil. Could it be that the metaphors themselves were seeded by something deeper, an instinct that we are not solitary lines, but intersections of threads stretching out of sight in all directions? Entropy may ensure the fabric frays, but even frayed fabric still shows its pattern. Every isotope we uncover adds a new stitch of understanding. The cosmic thread is not perfect. It is full of gaps and knots where memory has been lost. But even incomplete, it carries us. To trace one iron atom backward is to follow it to a stellar furnace, to follow the furnace to a supernova, to follow the supernova to galaxies woven of billions of such acts. Each step backward reminds us that our most private existence belongs to something immense. We often tell ourselves we are small beneath the night sky, and in many ways we are. Yet through these threads we are not beneath at all, we are within. To recognize this is to soften the sense of separation. The cosmic thread is not distant but immediate, tying every breath, every heartbeat, to events billions of years in the making. And yet, if every isotope and every strand of life carries its place in this cosmic weave, then how many other patterns are still hidden from us, waiting for recognition, their shapes too vast for us yet to see? Threads connect us to stars, but not only through atoms. Perhaps they also connect us through culture, through the fragile scaffolding of civilizations that rose and then vanished. Imagine, for a moment, that somewhere in the long stretches of prehistory, a people more attentive than we give them credit for looked upward one night and saw a star explode. Without telescopes, without mathematics as we know them, but with eyes sharpened by survival and with minds attuned to patterns we now forget, they may have recognized that the sky was not permanent, that its constellations could be undone by brilliance. And in that recognition, they may have thought to preserve it, not in words, which vanish, but in stone, which endures. Across our planet, countless monuments puzzle us. Standing stones aligned to solstices, walls etched with spirals, statues pointing toward horizons where unusual stars once rose. We often read these as calendars, as rituals of agriculture, as religious expression. But what if some of them are something else or something more? What if they are star records, mnemonic devices left by forgotten civilians of the sky, preserving events that they dared not let slip completely into silence? Think of a monolith's shadow cast against the earth at night, its alignment stretching not only to the dance of the sun but to a point where once a sudden blazing light appeared. Think of petroglyphs carved with circles radiating outward, once read as symbols of fertility or storm, but perhaps seeded by the sight of an unfamiliar star bursting among familiar constellations. The language is gone, but the geometry remains. Could these be sky records we mistake for other secrets? It is humbling to imagine civilizations tethered more closely to the cycles above, leaning into skies without city lights, navigating with stars as constant companions. If a supernova erupted in those eras, it would not have been a minor curiosity. It would have been a global astonishment, impossible to ignore, shaping entirely how they thought reality worked. Would they not then have tried to fix it into their memory, using the only technology they had, stone aligned with sight, story aligned with rhythm? Archaeology rarely entertains such cosmic readings, prefers material explanations, local meanings. And in truth, it is right to be cautious. Myth and speculation can too easily stretch beyond what evidence supports. Yet when the echoes overlap, spirals on walls, architectures aligned with particular stars, legends of fire descending from heaven, could it be we are hearing distant chords of the same event? Perhaps the remnants of one or even several supernovas still ripple through monuments we pass by but rarely look at with cosmic eyes. There is precedent for such cultural fossils. The Crab Nebula, for instance, was the remnant of a supernova seen in 1054, described in detailed records across China, Japan, the Middle East. Some indigenous traditions hold memory of it as well. If a millennium ago entire civilizations could pause to preserve the site in chronicles and monuments, why should we imagine that prehistoric people, sharper to the rhythms of the natural world, would not have done the same? The difference is that their books were hills, their journals were stones, their diagrams were patterns etched across caves. The possibility is not only fascinating but sobering. For if they did encode the memory of the sky, most of their records have already been erased. Toppled monuments, eroded carvings, stories forgotten as languages dissolved. We are left with fragments, riddles without answers, forgotten voices, remembered in outline only. These may be the truest civilians of the sky, those who lived closer to its cycles, witnessed its fire, and tried in their fleeting way to send a message forward to us. What they left, however cryptic, binds us to them. We too watch the sky for sudden change. We too build instruments and observatories to hold light that would otherwise slip away. We are not so different, except our monuments are telescopes, our stones are satellites, Our carvings are scientific records pressed in digital memory. Could it be that, in the far future, our own records will be misread, mistaken, their cosmic meanings forgotten, reinterpreted as other secrets? The thread continues, even if its meaning shifts with time. And yet, if civilizations before us looked up and preserved in stone the memory of dying stars, how many of their accounts lie still misunderstood, hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to ask the right questions of them? Civilizations may vanish, their monuments weather into silence, but the universe itself holds its own rhythm, steady and unbroken. The pulse of supernovas is not the isolated flash we imagine when hearing of a single dying star. It is repetition. It is cycle. Across galaxies, across millions of years, explosions arrive like the beating of a vast drum, slower than any human heartbeat, yet constant in their patience. The pulse of ages is not heard with ears, but read in the language of light and matter, in the way galaxies are shaped by repeated bursts of birth and death. In human time, a supernova is rare. Generations may live and die without ever seeing one with their own eyes. But in galactic time, they are almost common, arriving every century or two, threads of brilliance woven endlessly into the twilight fabric of the Milky Way. Imagine a city where fires erupt across districts so rarely a lifetime may pass without smoke, and yet from the balcony of eternity, you see them flare everywhere, at regular intervals, sustaining the ecosystem. Such is the paradox of the supernova. Both rare and endless, a rhythm hiding in vast time. The drumbeat begins within the stars themselves, in the delicate tension of fusion and gravity. Each star burns through its life like wood placed on a hearth, hydrogen first, then helium, then, for the most massive, iron that no longer yields its fire. Collapse follows, and with it, the final pulse outward. A shockwave radiates, scattering elements into the surrounding medium, seeding the stage for new stars, new planets, new possibilities. One star ends, but its pulse becomes the opening note for countless new ones. Entropy and creation lock themselves into pattern. When astronomers map galaxies, they see this rhythm in luminous clouds, nebulae glowing with the remnants of older explosions, filaments stretched like veins across the dark. These are not final wreckage but seeds. Each nebula drifts and condenses, birthing clusters of new suns in turn fated to burn, collapse, and pulse outward as their ancestors did. Across billions of years, this repetition sculpts galaxies like music sculpts silence, layers upon layers of resonance. Supernovae are not disruptions of galactic harmony. They are the rhythm on which that harmony depends. Perhaps some ancient humans, watching the constellations above, felt this rhythm though they did not know its mechanics. Perhaps the stories of cyclical destruction and rebirth, gods who die and return, echoes of eternal return, were mythic interpretations of something glimpsed in the order of stars. We know the truth only now, that the very atoms of our bodies are installments in this rhythm, but the intuition may have always been there, an undercurrent of inevitability. To think of supernovas as percussion is to adjust perspective on the universe. We often imagine the cosmos as silent, hollow, expanding into emptiness. But silence can contain rhythm. We cannot hear the drum, but we see its reverberations in every direction. The structures of galaxies, the composition of planets, the oxygen filling our lungs. The beat goes on not in sound but in scattering, not in noise but in balance. And in some strange way, so too does our own heartbeat sync with it. Not in tempo, for ours is brief, fragile, racing, while the universe's is stretched across epochs. But in essence, the heart beats, disperses energy, rests, and beats again. Supernovas do as well on scales beyond thought. Perhaps the affinity is why we feel so moved by the night sky. It is not only distance we see. It is resonance, a rhythm both foreign and familiar. The pulse of ages also humbles us, for it reminds us how young we are inside it. Civilizations rise and crumble in less than the fraction of a galactic beat. Myths occupy only the briefest silence between pulses. Even our species, with all its questions and monuments, exists for only a blink between echoes. Yet for us, this blink holds everything. life, imagination, memory. Could it be that the pulse feels timeless to us precisely because we are too small to hear its full drum? Still, if we learn to listen differently, we recognize we are inside its measure. Every isotope we find, every nebula we image, every star we watch forming from dust is a single note in the symphony of galactic time. The supernova pulse is not background. It is the very music on which existence is composed. The song of scattering and sowing, destruction and renewal. And yet, if we are only at the beginning of learning to hear this cosmic drum, how much richer might the music be, when someday we detect rhythms still hidden, pulses still echoing across the vast intervals of space and time. Every pulse leaves a resonance, and every supernova leaves behind a veil. Where once there was unbearable brightness, there remains now only a hushed remnant. A nebula, stretched outward in ghostly filaments of gas and dust. These nebulae are the afterimages of a star's death, the soft echoes of its collapse lingering across space long after the brilliance itself has faded. They do not blaze as suns do but drift in fragile ribbons, luminous only when struck by nearby starlight. They whisper, and if we are patient with our instruments, we hear them. Through telescopes, these remnants take on forms that feel almost human in their metaphors. Spirals, veils, webs, rings. The Crab Nebula, for instance, is the residue of an explosion witnessed on Earth nearly 1,000 years ago, its tendrils still expanding outward like the stretched cloth of a forgotten banner. Seen now through sensitive optics, it glows in soft blues and reds, fragile threads unraveling into the void. Imagine how much brighter it must have appeared to ancient eyes before it became faint. For generations it may have pulsed in the night, a strange flame hung in the heavens, before slipping into invisibility except to us with our instruments. These whispers remind us of how perception changes with time. For the earliest witnesses, the supernova was not mathematics but shock, awe, perhaps fear. For us, centuries later, it is data. Filaments mapped, photons measured, isotopes detected. Yet beneath these differences lies the same truth, that nebulae are stories written by stars as they left the stage. Stories not told in words, but in light stretched thin. There is something almost tender in their appearance. A nebula is not violent to the eye. It is soft, delicate, intricate in its weaving. From a distance of thousands of light years, its filaments could be mistaken for charcoal smoke drifting from some invisible fire. And perhaps that is exactly what it is, the cooling smoke of fire too vast for our imaginations, scribed into the cosmos for anyone who cares to pause and look. But they are more than symbols. Nebulae are laboratories of renewal. Their gas and dust fertilize star-forming regions, condensing over time into new generations of suns and planets. In this way, whisper becomes seed. What seems like a fading remnant is actually material in transformation, waiting patiently to ignite again. Memory becomes future, not merely past. Could it be that nebulae are reminders that disappearance is never final, that every scattering is also a preparation for something still unseen? The whispers also remind us of patience. Some nebulae last for tens of thousands of years before dispersing fully. For the universe, that is a heartbeat, but for us, that is history itself. A single nebula could have been watched across dozens of human lifetimes, painted into myths in one age, revisited in data during another. It is a bridge of continuity that surges quietly across our fragile impermanence. Looking through telescopes today, we see them faintly, but long ago, they may have been visible to eyes alone, milky smudges etched against the brilliant stars. Imagine an ancient traveler gazing at the horizon and noticing a peculiar glow where no glow had been before. Perhaps they mistook it for cloud, or for the wandering breath of a spirit. Perhaps they marked it in story or in pigment as best as they could. That light would have faded slowly with each passing generation, leaving behind only the legend of its presence. And so, nebulae whisper not only of stars but of time itself. They are the quiet syllables of the cosmos, words spoken softly enough that only the most attentive can hear. Today, with instruments sensitive to wavelengths far beyond our eyes, we extend our listening, catching whispers once lost to us. What we hear is always the same. Endings are beginnings. Dispersal is seed. Silence is not absence but transformation. And yet, if the whispers of nebulae are only the faint remnants of fires already past, how many such veils drift unnoticed, too dim for our tools, their voices still waiting for us to listen more deeply? Among the thousands, perhaps millions, who might have lifted their gaze toward a sudden new star, there was also the first. One solitary person who noticed the bright surge before anyone else, before whispers could spread, before stories could take shape. We do not know their name, we do not know their time or place, but somewhere in the long stretch of human presence on Earth, a pair of eyes registered what had never been there before. It may have lasted only a breath, only a moment when they glanced from firelight to horizon, but in that instant the universe performed its wonder for an audience of one. What must it have felt like? Perhaps it was terror, an invading flame that unsettled the very sky, a mark of omen. Stars were trusted companions, fixed, eternal. For one of them to erupt so suddenly may have unmoored the heart, like a hunter confronted by a predator's unfamiliar stare. Or perhaps it was awe that overwhelmed fear, an astonishment so complete that words failed, leaving only silence pressing against the ribs. And perhaps there was the most fragile possibility of all, that no reaction came immediately, just the quiet certainty that the world had changed, though no one else yet knew it. For some time, minutes, hours, maybe even days, it might have remained a private vision. Others nearby continued their tasks, unaware, as this solitary observer carried the secret of a changed heavens alone. They may have spoken or not spoken. How do you describe such a thing when those around you still see only ordinary sky? In that gap is loneliness, the gap between perception and recognition. To see what none beside you yet acknowledges can feel like a burden, even if it is wonder. And yet, there is intimacy in imagining this encounter. A single human being, fragile and small, and a star's death happening across unimaginable distance, bound together in one line of sight. The scale is disproportionate beyond reason, and yet the connection is real. To be the lonely witness is to embody what we all unknowingly are. Beings carrying awareness in isolation, glimpsing beauty or terror before finding words to share it. The cosmos presses against the individual heart before it ever brushes civilization. We might imagine the first witness keeping it quiet, folding it into themselves as into dream. They rise again the next night, glance upward again, and the light is still there, brighter, insistent, undeniable. Fear gives way to awe, awe grows to yearning, yearning spills into the need to tell. Finally they gesture, point, murmur to others, look. And with that, the private vision becomes communal. A ritual repeated each night as fires burn low and eyes lift upward together. But for those first moments or days it was theirs alone. It is worth lingering on this solitude because it is solitude we all understand. Each of us carries private visions, private wonders, things we notice that others have not seen or understood. And in that space lies both burden and gift. Burden because the experience waits in silence, unshared. Gift because in the unshared moment, the intimacy with mystery is unbroken, pure. The lonely witness lived with the cosmos whispering directly into them. An experience unique, an audience of one for a performance that dwarfed all performance. In truth, astronomy still holds this loneliness. Though we now observe in teams, in institutions, across instruments scanning all wavelengths, the first detection of a sudden flare still begins with one observer noticing an anomaly, a spike of brightness, an out-of-place line. Even now, recognition begins alone. The pattern of witness has never truly changed. And so, this chapter of the story humbles us. The great sweep of stars, galaxies, supernovas, nebulae, all bend for a moment into the intimacy of one pair of eyes, one heartbeat, one passing thought. This was not here before. From such small beginnings, whole stories unfold. From such silent shoulders, civilizations later build myths and science alike. The lonely witness was not only a solitary figure in the past. They are archetype, echo, reminder that every act of wonder begins with one person noticing quietly what others have yet to see. And yet, If every grand narrative starts as a private vision, how many moments of sky have been seen only once, by one unrecorded witness, dissolved forever into silence before anyone else turned their eyes upward? The lonely witness carried a memory in their eyes, but elsewhere, across the long sweep of life, the universe may have carried memory into bodies in a deeper, quieter way. Not through pigment on cave walls or isotopes in rock, but through the spirals of DNA itself. For radiation from distant stellar blasts does not always pass harmlessly. It seeps, it presses, it marks. Across millions of years, it may have etched small but lasting changes into the inheritance of life, writing its presence into the blueprint of all who came after. Starlight is not always gentle. Sometimes, it inscribes itself into us without asking. DNA is often described as language, a sequence of symbols folded into spirals, shaped into repeating rhythms that persist from generation to generation. Yet like any manuscript, it is susceptible to edits, insertions, erasures. Cosmic radiation, the invisible hail from dying stars, can strike directly into that fragile code. Usually these marks are repaired, the language restored by life's remarkable resilience. But sometimes a scar remains. Sometimes the change lingers past forward. It may be silent, tucked away in unused corners. Or it may alter the story, giving rise gradually to difference. A feature that aids survival. A feature that alters form. Once again, the sky leaves its marks not only in stone but in the very marrow of inheritance. In this way, DNA itself carries fossils of the stars. Not fossils we can hold in a museum display, but patterns that betray the touch of energies far greater than Earth's local pressures. Certain mutations may owe their birth not to accidents within cells but to a larger choreography. Space itself breathing radiation through our atmosphere, delivering sparks into lineages too small yet too vast to measure. Could it be that when we trace evolution's tree, when we marvel at its branching creativity, we are also tracing faint fingerprints of supernovae long gone? It humbles us to think that perhaps even our current form, our ability to stand upright, to speak, to wonder, carries a thread of origin written by starfire. We are, in this sense, not just products of Earth's soil but of the radiation that once drifted across light years to nudge life in new directions. Not only shaped by climate and continent, but sculpted, faintly, by starlight. To imagine that our very capacity for awe, to look at the night sky and feel humility, may have been enabled by those same skies altering lineages millions of years earlier is a thought that folds beginning and end into one. Science treads carefully here, for proof is difficult. Radiation may alter DNA, but tracing such changes backwards to cosmic cause is almost impossible. And yet speculation alone has power, because it reframes us as participants in the story of the universe rather than bystanders. If even a fraction of our inheritance carries scars of distant explosions, then we are bound not only to the dust of stars but to their light as well, light imprinted in us at levels no eye could ever see. It also echoes a broader truth. Life adapts by remembering its encounters. Mutations are not deletions but variations, the diary of survival written into flesh. Those encounters include volcanic ash, glacial advance, shifting tides and climates, and perhaps, once in a while, the radiation from a star too close, too bright, too sudden. Life does not forget. It integrates. It makes even disaster part of its own story, hiding catastrophe within the silent continuity of genetic code. We may not see those marks with the naked eye, but in laboratories, scientists decode fragments that carry the story of history. Tiny variations, conserved for eons, show where life met challenge and found a new way forward. Within such cryptic shifts may linger the fingerprints of cosmic violence. We carry them unknowingly, breathing through spirals inherited across unbroken chains, our lives both fragile and immensely resilient. Perhaps this is what it means to be of the stars. Not only that our atoms are stellar in origin, forged in furnaces of collapse, but that our very instructions may have been shaped, tilted, adjusted by radiation from distant deaths. We are inheritance twice over, matter and code, dust and spiral, both written subtly by the cosmos beyond us. And yet, If starlight itself may have altered the pathways of life, how much of what we are is truly Earth's alone, and how much carries the faint authorship of the skies, written just as patiently in molecules as in myths? Life carries scars of radiation we cannot see, yet even those traces are small beside another truth. Many of the cosmos events unfold on scales far larger than our perception can hold. Some stars live and die in predictable cycles, their fates echoing like tides, but tides that rise not every day, not even every millennium, but once across spans so long they exceed the full memory of our species. These are patterns we can sense only faintly, pieced together from remnants, mathematics, and imagination. They are cycles too vast for us to truly experience, and yet they govern the rhythm of galaxies as surely as lunar tides govern our oceans. For human beings, a lifetime feels long. A century holds enough change to fill libraries of memory. But for stars, such spans register hardly at all, mere moments in their long arcs of burning, collapse, and renewal. There are stars that pulse on intervals of thousands of years, stars that flare and then withdraw across epochs, stars that may even rotate through lifetimes of brightness and silence over millions of years. To us, they seem steady, fixed, unchanging. Only when we step back through telescopes, through geology, through archives of isotopes and fossils, do we glimpse the scale of these rhythms. Like someone listening to the sea who has only ever heard one wave, we mistake the brief for the whole. The Milky Way itself beats in such hidden tides. Supernovae occur with regularity, though human memory is too thin to notice the pattern. Every century or so, somewhere in our home galaxy, a star collapses and scatters its essence. If 99 years pass without one visible to us, we may imagine the sky is steady. But across millions of years, looking backward, the rhythm emerges. Bursts scattered like notes across the score of time. Our archives, rocks, shells, cores of ice, reveal those secret notes, hinting at a cosmic drum we cannot hear in the moment but only in hindsight. And perhaps the same is true of life itself. Extinctions, radiations, transformations seem random to us, isolated, like sudden shadows or bursts of bloom. But when seen against the longer arc, they may whisper of vast cycles, the periodic stresses of cosmic events, tides of radiation or debris, pressures that accumulate only once every several million years. Our species is too recent to feel these tides, too fragile to carry such memory, but Earth remembers them stitched into its crust. Could it be that what we call chance is instead our inability to perceive scales too large for our calendars to contain? There is humility in standing against such immensities. Human lives, even civilizations, are only sparks against the patience of these cycles. The rise and fall of empires are invisible blinks compared to the turning of stellar ages. Myths survive for thousands of years, but even they falter before the cycles of stars that reset across several million. Imagine a tide that comes not once each day, not once each month, but once across the lifetime of entire species. How could we ever grasp it? How could we hold a scale that eclipses us so fully? And yet we are woven by it, shaped within it. Our every breath depends on its unfolding. Science becomes our only extended perception, our prosthetic memory. With mathematics we reconstruct rhythms our senses cannot detect. With isotopes in rocks we trace cycles too long for myths to carry. With telescopes we glimpse repeating motions that stretch beyond our patience. And still, even science must bow to the immensity of what it uncovers. We can calculate a cycle, but we cannot live inside it. We must accept the strangeness of knowing we are temporary guests moving in currents we will never fully perceive. Perhaps this is why we feel awe before the night sky. Deep in our bones we sense these hidden rhythms. Just as we feel the pulse of the ocean's tide though we cannot see it begin, perhaps we sense the cosmic cycles, faint intuitions of vastness that hum within us. We are cradled in patterns that do not require our understanding to continue. They rise, they fall, they carry us whether we look up or not. And so, the cycles we cannot see are not failures of perception, but reminders of continuity beyond us. To live without noticing them is still to live within them. We rise, we speak, we vanish. Yet behind our brevity, Galaxies breathe their long inhalations. Stars count their slow heartbeats. Universes roll their tides across spans far beyond calculation. And yet, if these cycles stretch beyond all we know, how many more remain concealed entirely, their tides still unseen, their pulses still unheard, waiting for us or whatever follows us to step far enough back in time to feel their rhythm? When we look upward, it is tempting to think of the sky as empty space, a void punctured here and there by light. But with softer patience, we can see it differently. The night itself is sediment, a quiet deposition of countless grains spread across the black. Each star is a particle of memory, a speck settled into place over billions of years. And like all sedimentary layers, the sky holds within it patterns of flow and interruption. Steady accumulations punctured by sudden disturbances, cataclysms that break the calm and leave unmistakable signatures. A supernova is one such punctuation. Not a grain, but a boulder dropped suddenly into the river of light, impossible to ignore. Sedimentary rock here on Earth teaches us this rhythm. Rivers deposit sand, wind carries dust, oceans lay down shells. Over time, every small particle finds its resting place. Every storm or flood leaves behind a thickened layer, evidence of disruption. The night sky behaves in much the same way. Stars accumulate in our awareness as steady presence, delicate grains deposited over millions of years of galactic evolution. They feel unchanging, a fixed canvas above our lives. And then, once in a while, a star swells to brightness, ruptures into brilliance, and crashes into that otherwise even layer. The entire pattern is rearranged, if only briefly, by its intrusion. To ancient eyes, these rare celestial boulders must have been impossible to reconcile. Imagine charting constellations with steady trust, only for a dazzling light to arrive where before there was nothing, unbalancing the sediment of stars. It would have been like watching a cliffside crack in an instant, or a river overturn its course in a single night. Geological shifts written across the face of sky. Our myths, our art, our records were simply ways of trying to layer explanation over the sudden appearance of that cosmic stone. Science, too, has come to treat the sky as a kind of sedimentary archive. Telescopes measure the faint glow of background radiation, the oldest layer, the bedrock of time. Instruments detect stars of all ages, laid across the firmament like grains pressed in shale, each one telling of an era in galactic history. And when astronomers catalog supernovae, they recognize them as disruptions, cataclysmic deposits that stand out like thick red bands amid pale limestone. The sky is never a blank canvas. It is layered, stratified, a sediment of light recording both calm continuity and sudden eruptions. Perhaps that explains why supernovas haunt us so deeply. They are not subtle. They crash into the strata of our seeing the way a boulder crashes into a river, sending shockwaves outward. You cannot unsee them. Even after they fade, the memory of their intrusion lingers like sediment disturbed long after the current has moved on. Dust may resettle, rivers may smooth again, but the record of the boulder remains. Likewise, the constellations may reclaim their shapes, but we know they were interrupted, unsettled. We remember the star that should not have been there. Is it possible, then, that our very perception of time springs partly from this layered rhythm? We feel continuity until it breaks. We sense eternity until a sudden flare disrupts it. Just as layers of stone reveal a rhythm of deposition and interruption, our awareness builds itself from repetition pierced by surprise, by events too large to fold comfortably into our sense of normal. The sediment of the sky mirrors the sediment of the mind. And not all stars leave their mark with fire. Some vanish quietly, collapsing into black holes or fading into dwarf embers. Their absence is itself a layer, a thinning of grains. The sky's sediment tells stories of abundance and absence alike. Astronomers now suspect that many of the voids we see, regions less populated by visible light, are absences left by collapsed stars, the gaps in what was once denser sediment. Even emptiness has weight when read this way. There is a lesson here for us as well. Our days accumulate like grains of light, steady in rhythm. And then come events, some joyous, some devastating. that crash into our lives like supernovas, impossible to miss, altering the strata of memory forever. We carry those layers within us, just as Earth carries floods and stone and the sky carries fire and light. To be human is to live inside sediment, to feel the layering of time unfold grain by grain, and to endure the sudden jolts that settle forever into the record. And yet, if the sky is a sedimentary archive, what other boulders have fallen into it across time? Events blazing and fading before our lineages began, layers too old for us to see, their traces still rippling somewhere in the cosmic strata, waiting for us to notice? The sky's sediment does not only lie above us, it lies within us. Every grain of light, every burst of fire that once unsettled constellations, has left more than a memory in the heavens. It has left atoms resting in our blood, our bones, our breath. To say we are made of stardust is not metaphor. It is the simplest truth, stripped of ornament. The iron coursing through our bloodstreams, ferrying oxygen to every cell, was born in stellar furnaces and scattered in supernovas. The calcium scaffolding our bones first blazed into being when immense stars collapsed, their outer shells cast outward into galaxies. The very oxygen that fills our lungs, the basis of life as we know it, was forged in burning stellar cores. Every part of us is borrowed fire cooled into flesh. To imagine the first human witnesses of a supernova is to see them gazing not only at an ending, but at their own beginning. How could they have known that the light dazzling their eyes had already carried within it the story of them? To watch that explosion was, unknowingly, to watch the future narrative of life unfold. They may have called it omen or God or spirit, but what they were seeing was elemental inheritance. The fire that one day would become their children, and us and everything we now understand as living. Science explains this with the patient certainty of fusion and decay. Hydrogen fuses into helium, helium into carbon, carbon into heavier and heavier elements until the chain halts at iron. Beyond that, stability falters. The star collapses, detonates, scattering its arsenal outward. What remains is a cloud drifting into interstellar space, eventually condensing into planets, soils, oceans, and ultimately into the bodies of those who first watched the flare in the sky. The cycle is exact, inevitable. Life is not miraculous for existing. It is inevitable given the fire of stars. The miracle is only that consciousness arose to understand it. Still, there is something reverent about this knowledge. When we hold a stone in hand, we cradle minerals that once ignited in stellar cores. When we take a breath, we draw into ourselves atoms pressed outward by suns that died billions of years before our species even had eyes to see. To live at all is to participate in combustion slowed down into flesh. Could this be what awe truly is? Not only a feeling of smallness beneath the stars, but a recognition that there is no distance between us and them? The light above and the matter within are one and the same story. Perhaps this is what ancient myths reach toward in their stumbling ways. Stories of humans molded from clay, of divine fires gifting life, of gods whose bodies became the world. Were these tales not intuitive poetry about what we now know as stellar nucleosynthesis? They may not have known hydrogen or calcium, but they seem to sense a truth, that we are built from something vaster than Earth, something older than mountains, something burning. The myths wrapped the truth in symbols. Science unwraps it again, and the essence remains unchanged. There is also humility in remembering that these flames came before us and will come after. Stars are still exploding across distant galaxies, still scattering the seeds of matter that may one day become other planets, other beings. When we look up into night, perhaps there are civilizations not yet born, waiting silently in dust still drifting from supernova shocks. If we are fire given form, then so too will they be. Each shining death writes a new possibility across time. More than inheritance, this is belonging. The substances that give us breath and thought tether us to the sky as kin. To care for life here is to care for the oldest fire, carried forward in fragile vessels. We are not exceptions to the universe, we are its echoes. To bleed is to release iron forged before Earth was born. To breathe is to inhale oxygen fashioned from suns. To walk is to set calcium into motion, a choreography of elements first released in cosmic detonations. The body is not apart from the stars. It is their archive, walking, remembering silently with every gesture. And so, every witness of a supernova, whether in myth or in science, sees more than death. They see a reminder of origin. They see that endings disperse beginnings, that collapse builds renewal, that we ourselves are proof of fire transformed into blood. The flare, brilliant enough to unsettle the night, is also intimate enough to course within us, inseparable from what we call life. And yet, if every pulse of stellar death writes new matter into being, seeding futures we cannot yet imagine, what lives, what voices, what forms are still waiting in the dust, waiting to be born from the fire that continues to scatter across the universe. When the flare fades, the sky forgets its brilliance. What was once brighter than the moon dwindles into ordinary darkness, then slips further until no trace can be seen at all. Stories may linger, carried around fires or carved into caves. Isotopes may settle into soils, invisible but lasting. Bones may inherit atoms that first burned in stellar furnaces. But memory, fragile in language and fleeting in flesh, grows dim. Eventually, what remains is silence. Not the silence of absence alone, but the silence that carries weight, the silence of a question left unanswered. This silence is not empty space. It is continuity. It is what follows every pulse, what encircles every myth, what bridges each gap between witness and forgetting. Silence is the sediment into which flashes and histories sink. When myth dwindles, when memory collapses, when the last telling of a story fades into dust, silence holds it still, the way sediment holds fossils, the way ice holds air, the way the universe holds background radiation. Silence is not erasure. It is the page left blank after a chapter, carrying forward quietly what words could not. Perhaps this is why we are so unsettled by it. Humans are storytellers by instinct. When we see light, we must describe it. When we feel awe, we must share it. Yet the universe does not always answer in dialogue. Often it answers in silence, and we must learn to dwell within it. In the fading of a supernova's light lies a lesson deeper than brightness itself. All stories resolve, all brilliance dims, all voices quiet. What endures is not the flare, but the stillness after. Scientists, too, meet this silence. Telescopes detect photons, data collects in long streams, but the farther we stretch toward beginnings, the louder silence becomes. Between stars lie voids so immense that even light cannot bridge them quickly enough for our minds. We map radiation, we chase isotopes, we measure fossils of the sky, but behind every discovery waits a question unanswered, a frontier of silence. What happened before the flare? What follows the fading? Where does memory go when even matter returns to diffuse clouds? Cosmology can model, mathematics can predict, but still the silence waits, indifferent to our need for closure. And yet, within this silence dwells reflection. To see light fade is to confront our own mortality, not in metaphor only, but in physics itself. The atoms of our blood are borrowed. The bones we carry are scaffolds of starlight, destined themselves to scatter back into dust. When we watch a star collapse, we are watching not something alien, but a mirror tilted at a vaster scale. The flare is not only its death, but a rehearsal of ours, played across millions of years. Did the first witnesses know this, even without science? Did they sense in their awe a tremor of recognition, that the sky was teaching them about themselves? Perhaps this is why we return again and again to the night sky despite its indifference. It does not speak, but we feel spoken to. It does not remember in words, but we feel remembered. The silence above is endless, yet within us rises the strange certainty that we belong to it. Could it be that awe itself is the echo of cosmic silence resonating in us, asking questions we cannot stop asking? Every culture has ended its stories in this way too. Not with a final answer, but with an open space. Myths leave mysteries unresolved. Scriptures fade into prophecy. Even science calls its deepest unknowns by names that feel more like poetry. Dark matter, dark energy. These are not explanations but placeholders, fingerprints of silence. They remind us that beyond light, There is darkness we cannot pierce. Beyond certainty, there are landscapes we can only walk in wonder. And so, what remains after every flare, every myth, every isotope traced, every witness forgotten, is not clarity. What remains is silence, layered with questions. Questions that cycle. When we saw a star die, did we also glimpse ourselves? Did we see in its collapse the echo of our own briefness? Did we see in its scattering the proof of our own beginnings? Were we watching an ending, or a continuation too large to frame? Silence does not answer. It allows the questions to resonate, unbound, unresolved. And maybe this is the truest form of memory the universe offers. Not words filed neatly into archives, not monuments immune to erosion, but questions carried across time. Questions that outlive empires and civilizations. Questions that hum each time we lift our gaze at night. The silence after the supernova is only the stage on which those questions continue performing. And so here, at the edge of the story, where burning fire dissolves into blank space, we do not finish. We pause. We hold open the silence. We allow awe to remain unanswered. For in the end, silence itself is the final witness, the one presence that neither collapses nor fades, the one thread tying flare to fading, dust to bone, witness to inheritance. And yet, if silence is what endures, should we call it emptiness, or should we call it the universe's most patient way of asking us to listen?